All right, good evening, listeners. Welcome to Motley Crude, episode number 30. I'm Kevin. This evening with me, I've got Ryan. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing great. And we've also got Andrew with us. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right.
Good stuff. Good stuff. This evening, of course, surprising nobody, will be talking about the FAQ that dropped, and of course how the sky is falling on everyone right now. But before we get to all that, let's talk a little bit about our hobby. So let's kick off first of all with Ryan. What have you done over the last 4 days since we recorded?
Nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the pace of releases is exceeding our ability to hobby between episodes at this point.
Yeah, essentially, I have not done anything hobby related other than digest this FAQ since our last episode.
Yeah, and like scroll all of the chatter about it online, I'm sure.
Oh yes, my eyes are bleeding.
Yes, awesome. Andrew, what have you been up to?
Just a lot of terrain making. I mocked up a possible way to do hills on a city themed mat, which took a lot of individual bricklaying out of styrofoam, but I think the end result's looking pretty sweet, so I'm gonna go with it. And just like a bunch of printing, more terrain for CCBB. Started painting some of the stuff I printed before. I got a test on a possible way to do crackling effect without actually using crackle paint.
Yeah.
That's trying right now, so probably by the end of this episode, I'll see if it actually works or not. But other than that, not too much. Just reading FAQ shit and laughing at everyone crying that the world's burning.
Yeah. I feel like it's becoming a theme of this podcast that we hop on the air here and we're like, everything's going to be fine. It's actually not that bad. Yeah. So for me, I played a one game of Old World since we last recorded. It was that mirror match, double Chaos Dwarf action. So yeah, it was a big win for me. So great. And aside from that, I continued to build stuff for the Minotaurs and the Wolves of the Sea. Built a ton of Chaos Warhounds. Converted up like a Minotaur, like a cool Doom Bull, all that kind of stuff. So it's been pretty busy. But things are going to quiet down over the next 2 weeks. I'm going on vacation with the family, so there'll be less hobbying for sure happening. Cool. Ryan, one thing we haven't done over the last few episodes is talk about upcoming events. You want to run us through what's on our radar?
Of course. So within the broader Eastern Ontario region that we exist in, 19 July, there's a doubles tournament at Nexus in Kingston, Ontario. And all of these you can find on Best Coast Pairings. On 20 July, there is a tournament being put on by our regular visiting host, Danny, at Red Dragon in Ottawa. And that one still has plenty of space.
Yeah.
23-24 August, Capital City Bloodbath here in Ottawa. Andrew's big event. Put on by Canhammer. 13-14 September in Montreal's the Montreal Old World Grand Tournament. I want to say, I don't have it on my list, but I want to say the 2nd of August, there's also an Old World tournament in Toronto being put on by some combination of Val from Square Based and another entity.
Okay.
And then 18-19 October in Toronto is Square Based Open Toronto 2025.
Awesome. And that takes us to the autumn. Good stuff. Okay, so this evening, as I mentioned in the opening segment there, we're going to be talking about the FAQ. So let's start with some high-level stuff. The FAQ/errata just dropped, and it's absolutely massive. There's been a lot of discussion and, dare I say, emotional response across the community online. I'll start with Ryan here. Like, what are your initial thoughts on this like monster document? And do you think it addresses some of the issues you see with the game right now?
Yeah, like so broadly speaking, I like the effect of this document. I I question some of the like choices they used in how they worded or errated things or deleted things. Um, but I like what this does to the game broadly. Um, I also think that if you read any part of this and think about it for more than 15 seconds, you've thought too hard about, what 1 to 2 sentences mean. Just going to put that out there. Do I enjoy having 17 pages just of like core rulebook addendums? Not particularly, though I might just like actually paste some of these little blocks of text into my rulebook. But
Mhm.
um, it's overall, I think it's a big quality of life improvement for the game insofar as it helps, you know, re-level the playing field for a variety of different unit types. Um, so that, maybe in conjunction with matched play, we'll see more uh, ranked infantry or more, different organizations or methods of building armies.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, Andrew.
Um, yeah, overall, like I think it's a positive thing. I like the majority of the stuff in here. Um, I don't know. I think like this paired with the match play rules, like we're looking at a very new game completely. This is more like a 2.0 type change, I feel, given everything um coming out all together at once like this. And it definitely is going to shake up basically the meta no matter how you engage with the game. If you're like a more themey, um, fluffy player, or beer and pretzels player, or tournament oriented, like I think no matter who's engaging with this game, like it really changes things up for those people. So yeah, I think overall like it's pretty massive FAQ, but I think most of it's pretty positive. So it's kind of my take.
Yeah. No, I agree with the both of you actually. This is the so we've had like a slew of releases over the last few weeks between all the army books, of course, the match play guide, and this is the one I was the most excited about. Generally, I'm quite happy with the direction GW went in. I think this is a step in the positive direction. And you're right, Andrew. This is like absolutely going to shake things up, especially when you combine it with like the match play document and changes to how we're actually scoring and winning games. So yeah, all that together is going to be massive. There's some things that, like, if I switch gears a little bit to things that I think are a little bit less positive. So there's some things which were not addressed, which we've talked about on this show before, extensively, that are a little bit problematic right now. Like, just an example that comes off the top of my head there, like Swift Stride being such a powerful and prevalent rule, has not been touched in any way, shape, or form, which to me would have seemed like an obvious thing to go after if you want to errata and maybe reset sort of how the game is played. But fine, like it's neither here nor there. And the other thing I'm going to say is not addressing points in a more significant manner, I think, is a bit of a miss. Like, they showed a willingness to address points by making, I believe, a total of 5 points changes across the 2 units, 2 things in Bretonia, and then 1 thing in Tomb Kings. Across the, oh no, sorry, 1 in Warriors of Chaos, 1 in Bretonia, and then Tomb Kings. Like, that's seems like a miss to me if you're going to do it. Like, there's so much. I think you can save yourself a lot of beating around the bush by changing rules if you just modify the points that are sort of at the core of the issue. But anyways, overall, I am very happy, and I think it's gonna shake things up like massively. Um, Okay. So I'm gonna go back to you, Andrew, because you started talking about this, mentioning that it felt almost like a new edition. But like, how do you quantify the effects of this FAQ, the match play guide, and all the arcane journals that have released over the last few weeks? Like, do you think yes or no we're essentially playing in a new edition? Does this feel to you like it's a new game?
Less so the influence of the AJs, because we've been getting those sprinkled out ever since
Yeah.
the game's release. So I don't think any individual AJ really has an effect on the overall meta of the game. Maybe that specific faction, but definitely the match playbook and the FAQ coming out basically. Well, I guess technically the match playbook isn't out, but it's leaked everywhere. And the FAQ coming like right at the same time. Like the effects of both of those products together definitely basically changes the game completely from what it was like even 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Massive rules changes on, some of the core mechanics of this game, as well as like as we'll get into later, like big buffs to infantry, which is something that has been a major complaint basically since this game released, was that they didn't seem as effective as they should be, or that
Mhm.
they were in previous editions of the game. So I think like taking all this stuff into effect, like yeah, this is definitely feels like a new edition of the game, and it's pretty exciting. Like it's a new frontier all of a sudden again.
Yeah. Ryan.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what Andrew said. Like, it's so much content all at the same time that all like interplays with each other
Mhm.
that I think it is broadly similar to like a like third to fourth ed 40K type rollover. Like it's, you know, same functional game, but things have changed in a way so as to tip what works and what doesn't in what situations.
Yeah.
Um, but I also kind of appreciate that it did all happen at once instead of like, here's your FAQ, and then 3 months from now, here's your matched play guide. Like, I don't know, it's kind of nice to just have to adapt to all of the problems at once. Um, because as we discussed in the match play episode, we have so many different levers to like tweak what the mission play experience is going forward. That if people start to solve one way of doing it, we can muck around with stuff. So I kind of like that it's all at the same time. But
Yep. No, I agree with you. If you're not gonna go all scientific method on us and change one thing at a time to like reach the perfect version of the game, then you may as well change everything at once to at least make the transition as easy as possible on us.
well, as we know, the perfect version of the game is unknowable.
Yes, that's a bit of an yeah, agreed. Yeah, no, I for my part, I think so. This has been described before it came out, like by various pundits and rumor mongers that it was like a version 1.5 of the game, and I think that's the right way to describe it. Or what you mentioned there, Ryan, is like the transition. Some editions have like some pretty, let's say, like mild transitions and are just like refinements from one to the next, like between third and fourth, as you described. I think it's that kind of a change. So like a 1.5 to me is the way to describe it. We didn't introduce entirely new phases or like new mechanics to the game. It's more like sort of a refinement and the interaction between the different rules and stuff like that. So yeah, a version 1.5. Yeah, or maybe we left beta version and we're now like in the 1.0 version of what the old world would look like. But it definitely is like playing a new game at this point.
I mean,
Um,
you could
yeah.
even say it's like version 1.5.1.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. We may have a 1.5.2 soon, considering the discussion that I've seen online, but we'll get to that. Okay, so how we're going to be reviewing this FAQ / errata, because they're now all combined, is we're going to be first of all doing the core rules and the core rules, and then we'll be moving on, of course, to the forces of fantasy, and then closing out with the the Ravening Hordes. We're not going to be reading every single change. We've skipped only to the changes that are that will meaningfully impact our game, and we're not going to read off the entries either. We're going to give you the summary of what those changes are. So without further ado, let's go to the first one, which is, I think, one of the most impactful ones in the book, certainly. And that's with regards to casting rolls, casting results, and casting values. And it also applies to dispel values. So basically, wizards now count their wizard level as divided by 2 and rounded up for the casting and dispelling bonuses. So I'm sure you've all heard this all over the internet at this point, but both a level 1 and 2 count as get a bonus of 1 when they cast, and then a level 3 and a 4 both get a bonus of +2 when they cast. And the only difference between those is, of course, the number of spells that they know, as well as, I guess, dispel and dispel range if you're going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Yeah, Andrew, how do you think this impacts the game?
I think this is really a positive thing. It makes spells a little bit more difficult to cast. I know they've adjusted a few of the casting values in response to this, but now like having a level 4 isn't like an almost auto guarantee to cast some of those lower casting level spells. Also, and I think that like the biggest thing is it makes those level 3, well, even 1 to 3 wizards actually a viable choice in the game now. Before, it was like level 4 or bust. Really, if you were trying to cast with anything but a level 4, odds are you weren't going to get it off if your opponent had their +4 to dispel. So bringing everything down, I think is huge, and I think it's just really good for those low level casters, because now like you'll actually probably get that shit off, as well as the knock on effect with bound spells. A lot of those were not worth taking because it'd be like power level 2. It's like, cool, a level 4 is just going to shut down that item. Why am I going to waste the points? Now some of those things are very much viable choices, just because you will get them off a little bit more reliably.
Yeah, agreed with you. I think we'll talk about it in a few minutes, but the making spells generally more difficult to cast is, I think, a positive one for sure. One thing you didn't mention, but this also makes magic resist more relevant in the game. I mean, before, if you had magic resist 1, but everybody was casting at +4, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're magic resist 1 and everybody's casting at most on a +2 before any other random faction bonuses, like, it suddenly feels and is probably in game much more relevant. And then you mentioned it, but like the choice between, let's say, a level 3 and a 4 is actually a meaningful choice now. I think the calculus becomes, if your plan is to use your wizard for magic defense, then you go for a level 3 and you don't pay those 30 points to get an extra spell. And because I think that's the way most people actually run their wizards, is it's there to defend against enemy magic. Because if you've got no other bonuses to it and you're just casting your base 3 or 4 spells, and you don't have access to some of the better lores, then in a lot of cases it's what the spells do kind of is a little bonus, but generally you want to protect yourself. And if that's the plan, then I think level 3s are now a very, very good option to save a few points, shave a few points off your list too. So I like that this like the calculus has really shifted on what you want to bring in terms of wizards. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this one?
I also really like this. Like in the article that Games Workshop put out, they spent a bunch of time kind of explaining how they wanted Magic to be more dicey, pun intended. And
Yeah.
like up until this point, it was very much, I bring my level 4, I'd maybe stack a couple casting buffs on them or something, and you are fairly reliably casting while denying the same to your opponent.
Yeah.
Where this is more of a, in a 6-turn game, you might get your spell off 3 or 4 times, whatever, just because of the changes to numbers and the changes to casting values and whatnot.
Yeah.
which means magic is now like a tool, but not like a dominating force of the game, which is nice. And like arguably these changes may invalidate the reason that like the grand melee comp on wizard strength was created in the first place. Um, so there's that. The other thing I really like about this is it adds value to something that like conceptually I always wanted to take but never mechanically worked, which is like the level 1 damsel on a Bretonian warhorse just slapped into a unit of like 5 or 9 knights. For 76 points, I can now use my signature spell to reliably give them a regen. They get magic res 2 and magical attacks.
Yeah.
And
Huge.
because of how lance formation works, she can sit in a spot where she doesn't, disrupt the like combat power of the lance.
Mhm.
And before, if you did that, you just get shut down and like never actually get to do anything. And you basically just wind up taking, you'd spend the 90 points to get the level 2. Now you're spending over 100 points. At that point, why not spend more points and just bring a prophetess instead? So it really does, like, if you have a good signature spell either in your lore, like the lore you're taking, or from your faction, it really does open up some options for like level 1 like buffing wizards.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and it levels the playing field a bit so that things like Nuln and Wild Hunt and everything else that can't take level 3s and 4s um, can still do things. Like I was just looking today, and with these changes, like I can still have a master mage that knows 1 or 2 spells, and you give him a wizard's staff, and if those spells are assailments or magic missiles, which is what you want them to be anyway,
Yeah.
He's casting them as if he's a level 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So for
Yep.
fewer points or the complete lack of availability, I can still get a guy that knows, like if I give him a wizard staff and a lore familiar, which is exactly 50 points, I can have a nice like 140 point wizard in an army that can't take a level 3 or 4 that's still casting fireball as if he was a level 3 or 4.
Yeah. Yeah, that's,
So
you made some two really good points there that I hadn't mentioned, but I think which are massive. Is one, this like it really softens the blow on those armies of infamy that don't have access to level 4s. If that gap has been like really shortened between the 1 and 2s and 3 and 4s, so that's great. You had a magic item on there, as you mentioned, and suddenly you're most of the way there. So I think that makes those armies more palatable to a lot of players, and therefore you'll see more of them on the table. And I think that's great for like faction variety and just game variety. So that's fantastic. And the other thing you mentioned is you mentioned it briefly, Ryan, but you talked about composition, and like it feels to me like this document, and it's probably the case, frankly, because of how production works, but this document and then the match play guide were done at 2 very different times, because the comp restriction in the match play guide, which limits you to 1 level 4. When you look at how magic levels work now, because level 3s and level 4s are essentially the same, it's as if you could get still 4 level 4s under the old system. Sorry,
yep.
3 level 4s under the old system, and you lose 2 spells out of 12. So whatever.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one. Andrew, you want to take it?
Yeah. So for barely controlled power, when you roll an 8 or 9 on the miscast table, only the wizard casting cannot attempt any more spells. Others are now unaffected. This one, I think, is thematically good, but it was always kind of funny to watch your opponent not be able to cast anymore when they fuck up on the dispel table.
Yeah.
I know that's still one of the options, and I think, jokes aside, like I think it's probably a little bit more healthier for the game that it works like this. It kind of doesn't make sense that all the magic in your army would shut down because one wizard screwed up a little bit, and it makes that other one, I guess the 10 to 12, the one that
Yeah,
actually shuts down, like it makes that more detrimental when you do. So it gives like a good like scale on like, okay, I screwed up a little bit, this wizard's out for the turn. And then if you screwed up royally, like then the other wizard's out. It just makes casting a little bit more safer.
agreed. Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is fine.
Cool. Ren?
No, I agree with Andrew on this. I like that change, and you're absolutely right. Like a 10 to 12 is still perfect invocation combined with the player can't cast any more spells.
Hmm.
So having one where the wizard just kind of fucks themselves is decent. I think it's a good change.
Okay, I'm a little bit of the opposite opinion. Like, I'm not too bothered by this. It's not a big deal, but I felt like it made the miscasting table more impactful. I think miscasting right now is a little bit tame. Like, the effects are not that bad. So like tuning down the effects of miscasts, I'm not necessarily for. But like, it's not a big deal. I mean, Magic has been tuned down, I think, overall in this FAQ. So the fact that they made a single type of miscast less impactful is not the end of the world. But I think I like the narrative aspect of, the you miscast and then things start to get really wacky. So yeah, I mean, it's fine. Is my take. I don't mind, but I also like an impactful miscast table. Cool. Ryan, you want to take the next one?
Yeah. So dispelling has been changed so that wizards who are engaged in combat can now dispel spells targeting them or their unit. So before, wizards engaged in combat couldn't dispel at all. I think this is a phenomenal change because now, if your wizard and their escort or your wizard themselves is in combat and someone tries to like Plague of Rust you or cast an assailment on you or whatever, you could actually use the defensive capability of that wizard. But at the same time, that wizard is engaged in combat and he's not sitting there like shutting down some guy's fireball 24 inches away.
Yeah,
So I think that's a nice balance between, like gamey rulesism and like narrative what wizards are doing. Um, I also think it's a nice combo because a lot of wizards do also come with magic resistance.
yeah,
So like, you know, being in the unit and then being able to dispel and having made casting the spell harder and everyone's wizarding levels are lower than they were before really does make the like wizard in a bunker full of troops or like foot demonology sorcerer with some chaos warriors like not terrible.
agreed. Yeah.
um anyway, that's all.
No, I fully agree. I think this is a cool thematic change. It didn't make sense to me that Wizard A trying to hammer hand Wizard B, like Wizard B had no ability to impact that. So I agree with it thematically and I like it and I think it's good for the game. Andrew.
Yeah, like I agree with all your guys' points. But also I think this paired with the first thing we talked about in terms of the wizard's power level making like level ones and twos more viable. I
Yeah.
think you're going to see a lot more like level ones and level two wizards bunkered in units now, whereas before, oftentimes if you took a level four, they'd usually be either alone on some sort of flying mount, kind of just hanging out with, um, like hiding, or like in my case, like I always took the sorceress on the Pegasus, and she just kind of like stay behind either my cold ones or my um, dark riders, trying to stay safe. And I saw that in other armies as well. Um, but now I think you're going to actually see some like cheap pocket wizards being put in units to give them buffs, to give them magic defense. Um, so I think this just helps push players in that direction as well, because now that wizard isn't shut out of any of the phases when they're in combat. They're going to be a defensive unit for that unit to help them be stronger, and then also casting spells and helping out. So I think like these all kind of have like a knock-on effect on each other.
Yep, agreed. And when you have a combat type wizard that's like a hybrid, he gains definitely some functionality out of that. And then Ryan, you were talking about level 1s or 2s that have magic resist 1. Well, in that context, they're essentially dispelling as an old level 4 would for, I don't know,
Yep.
half the points, a third of the points. So that's massive change.
Damsels are magic res 2. They are
Yeah.
amazing now.
They're like some of the best dispellers. Yeah. When they're targeted, I mean, yeah. Awesome. Cool. Next one, I think it's me. Okay, so dispelling vortex spells has changed. So if you've been terrorized since the old world came out by pillars of fire, this is the one for you. Basically, the dispel range to dispel a vortex is now calculated to the vortex itself rather than the casting wizard. This I think is massive. It prevents a lot of annoying gamey type behavior. Like you saw it not super early for a significant portion of the edition with the Sisters of the Thorn casting Pillar of Fire and then just using a reserve move to walk out of dispel range, and then you essentially spending the rest of the game with 3 or 4 pillars of fire just willy-nilly going through your lines and essentially killing your whole army. So being able to dispel the vortex itself and stopping that kind of behavior, I think is fantastic. It's especially good for like your individuals who don't play the game as much, or your newer players, so that you don't get gotcha'd by some type of situation like that. And it also makes sense to me thematically that a wizard would be dispelling the big honking tornado in front of him rather than dispelling somehow a mage that's like a kilometer away somewhere on the battlefield. So yeah, this is great. I like it a lot, and it's good for the game. Andrew.
Yeah, like this is just straight up a positive. Like you said, it shuts down a lot of abuse that we used to see. Um, and it, thematically, it just kind of makes sense. So I think this is a big positive.
Awesome. Ryan?
Totally agree. Remains in play. Like, it's just super handy. The only thing that I do find interesting is there are other effects that can get away from the wizard that remain in play that aren't vortices, that you still have to go find the wizard and dispel. But that's cool. Like, if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. I don't really
Yeah,
care. I just think it's
sure.
interesting.
Yeah, agreed. It's a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're all in favor of this one. Let's see about the next one. Andrew.
Who gets to attack in fighting rank? So this is a change on page 2 of the FAQ. Now only models who are both in the fighting rank and within the distance indicated by their movement characteristics of the enemy get to fight. This change also applies to models that can make supporting attack. So this is kind of a word salad, but essentially what it does is prevents you doing line hammer, which I don't know how prevalent that was anyway, despite what a lot of the online influencers would let you believe. At least in our meta, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't think I've ever seen it in the events I've ran. But to boil it down is like if you're making supporting attacks, or not supporting attacks, but models non-base to base on your fighting rank, only models on the ones who are only models who aren't base to base can fight as long as they're within their movement distance. So if you take a dark elf spearman, for example, their movement 5. So if I have a big sort of long line hammer line for whatever reason with spearmen, only models 5 inches away from the models on either end of my fighting rank that aren't in base to base can fight. I've probably made that sound even more confusing than it is, but essentially what it boils down to is if you're not in base to base and you're out of your movement distance, you can't make attacks.
Yeah.
And this goes also backwards in terms of making supporting attacks. So if you have spears, and you're 3 ranks away, you better make sure you have enough actual movement on your movement stat to be able to reach the whatever opponent you're trying to swing at.
Yeah. Awesome.
That being said, I think this is good. It shuts down a problem that I don't think existed, but I think it'll at least shut a lot of complainers up about this. And they could have maybe made it a little bit easier to figure out, because I think you're going to get into situations where if you have sort of big, long ranks that are also deep, you're going to have like a weird sort of half circle of stuff that is going to be able to fight. So, like, let's say, using the spearmen as an example again, I have 40 arranged in ranks of 10. I guess with the spearmen one. Oh, I will. But they're fighting like a lone cavalry unit. Um, there'll be certain things in base contact that can't, but then as you move back, it'll be like less stuff being able to make supporting attacks because you're getting outside of the movement distance. It's really hard to explain this without a picture, but hopefully you guys can kind of picture it, where it'll be like a half circle of stuff that'll be able to attack and base contact. And I'm sure there's going to be arguments coming up in games. It's like, well, that guy's like basically in, or like, he's about 5. So I think they could have worded that a little better, but I think the outcome of this rule is still a positive thing. So I'm not going to crap on it too much, because I think overall, I think this is a good rule.
Yeah, what you're saying, Andrew, is because of how geometry works, units in the second or third rank, when you have spears, basically they're not at the same distance as the ones in the front rank. So it's not like,
Correct.
they won't all be able to attack. So it is, annoying. Ryan?
Yeah, no, I overall like the effect this has, and like really what it comes down to is like the frontage of the charging side now matters to what gets to fight. So, if you smash like a monster that's on 60 or something, you know, 10 inches left and right of a 60 millimeter base is definitely going to be fewer models than 10 inches left and right of like a, 10 model wide unit
Yeah.
or whatever. But where this really has kind of, where it has kind of a huge impact is things like dwarves, or when you get is it a demonology spell that reduces people's movement?
Yes. Is it? No, it's not Gathering Darkness. That one's Leadership and Initiative.
Yeah.
But there is one. Yeah.
Anyway, there's spells
And,
that muck with movement. The stupid Cathayan cannons are
useful.
now going to reduce people's fighting rank size. Like there's a lot of interesting intricacy to this. And while I do agree with the like geometry problem caused by the like protractor bit, at the same time, like if you're only talking about, like the most number of ranks you can generally be fighting in once we go through all these changes is 3.
Mhm.
Even on 30 millimeter bases, since you're measuring from the back of the first rank, it should like you might lose a total of 2 models in like extremely large size units. Like it shouldn't be even on like movement 3 infantry. That geometry problem should not be losing you like fight winning amounts of models, I guess is what
No,
I'm getting.
you're right.
But people will
No,
nitpick over whatever. So that's fine.
yeah, it's
The
more just
inability to
annoying the extra step, right? Like of having to be like, okay, let me
absolutely.
measure.
Absolutely. But also, like, there's also going to be a lot of situations where the frontage of the unit that attacks you will be wide enough that
Oh, 100%.
unless you are in like a ridiculous line, um, you're all going to be able to fight anyway. Where
Yeah,
it does get
that's on
weird,
me.
is lances, like Bretonian lances formations, because only one 30 millimeter model is physically in base to base.
Yeah.
So you would go plus and minus the movement value left and right of one 30 millimeter model. However, then every model that is in that window, including when we get to the other changes to regular and heavy infantry, you wind up with this weird situation where it's like, okay, you narrowed down what gets to fight you, but you have two ranks of models that all count as fully in base contact with every model in your lance. So
Yeah.
it's a little weird.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
that one needs to
overall,
get cleaned up, I think. Yeah.
yeah, like it can certainly be cleaned up. But anyway, I think this is an
You and
overall
L.
positive change insofar as it helps rein in a bit of the nonsense. And I don't think you saw it, but at CHTT, there was definitely one specific army that may have had like a 20 or 30 long line of Tomb Guard. That was like,
Yuri?
Nope, he was
no,
playing dwarves. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna name names, but that was like the shtick of their army was, I have this giant line of Tomb Guard and it does a bajillion attacks.
Yeah. Sure.
That's annoying.
So like that is directly impacted by this.
Mhm.
But I really think this does just help like smaller frontages hitting larger ones, and helping, you know, um like even something like dragon ogres, like 3 dragon ogres charging into 10 infantry, especially if those infantry are like dwarves, are now not necessarily taking, you know, the entire frontage's attacks back.
Yeah. Agreed. No, yeah, this is one that I'm also favorable on, but not. I think there's a few like mitigating things which you guys have touched on. So yeah, it fixes quote unquote line hammer as much as of a problem as you may or may not have thought that was. So that's fine. I think you know, and it's happened to me like even playing the game. I don't really do like a 20-30 long unit, but I have drilled on a lot of units in my army, and what typically would happen is in a game they would just keep end up drilling and drilling further apart because of I needed the attacks. And you know, there's been times when people have looked at me and they've been like, "You have 15 models wide or whatever." So I guess this ranges in that kind of behavior. And if people don't like it, like I'm fine with that. Yeah, and what I will say is that this solution is a lot cleaner than some of the solutions that were proposed for Linehammer. Like I think this is infinitely better than just saying units will be capped at 10 wide. Like this is way more of an elegant solution. However, I will say that like I agree with Andrew. It's a bit annoying when you do have to measure it out, especially across like multiple ranks, and like it just adds some time in terms of calculating your attacks, and then it will maybe impact different armies differently. Like your dwarves who are all movement 3, I'm sure feel a different way about this than your I don't know your movement 5 elves. But but that part's fine. So um, yeah, so generally positive on this one too. Cool. Quick one for you next, Ryan.
Yes. Fly no longer applies to follow up and pursuit moves. Okay, cool. I I can't think. I think once in almost, what has it been, like a year
18
and a
months.
half
Yeah,
of
yeah,
this game existing. I think once I have ever used the fly ability while pursuing, and it was because 2 units ran away from my Pegasus Knights, and one ran further than the other and had like, and it was the unit I was pursuing, and I there was like enough of a gap for me to like jump over the one unit and land like,
yeah.
but like, okay, cool, it doesn't apply. Eh, yeah, I don't care, like
Sure.
it is what it is. Like
Yep.
in that situation I'm describing, I still kill a unit, I just killed a different unit.
Yeah. Sure. So yeah, no, I agree with you. For me, it's a little like quality of life thing. At least it's very clearly spelt out now. Before there was some ambiguity or wasn't like super clear. So and it's happened. I think I don't know 2 or 3 times that me and my opponent have had the discussion. So I'm just happy that it's cleared up. I don't really care much one way or the other, but we know how it works now. Andrew,
Yeah, this is the amount of times this has come up for me is I think zero. I mean it's nice that they clear it up, but I don't think this is like game defining FAQ stuff right here.
fair. Cool. So I'll go to the next one then. So Frenzy has changed. So Frenzy now only gives you an additional attack on a turn where the unit charged. And Frenzy now systematically no longer applies to the Mountain Rider and vice versa, depending on who had the rule. So there were a few times, depending on the unit, where the Mount had it, but it wasn't restricted only to the Mount, for instance. And so it also gave it to its Rider. But now that is out, and Frenzy applies essentially only to the Mount or the Rider. Yeah, this one I'm not necessarily in favor of. I guess slightly negative. I think because so in a lot of cases it doesn't actually matter much. So if your frenzy is on cavalry or on a monster or something like that, you're generally charging anyways. So that's fine. You're still going to get it, and this won't impact your game. I think in terms of infantry, you either get frenzy when you charge, or generally speaking, they'll be attacking in 2 ranks now, so you'll sort of get the same effect. But there are some corner cases, and it kind of penalizes some units that I don't know needed to be penalized. For instance, something like your actually skirmishing infantry that had frenzy, so like a Marauder Berserker or something, kind of gets left out in the cold because of this change, because it's generally not doing much charging because of its speed, and it's also not getting the bonus attack when it does get charged. But those are like minor cases. So I don't know that we needed this change, I guess is my point, but it will not impact a lot of stuff. So I'm kind of like meh on this. Andrew.
Yeah. As someone who uses a lot of frenzy with my witches, at first when I read this, I was kind of like, yo, what the fuck? My witches suck now. But then I thought about it more. I'm like, well, you know, the difference in attacks is nothing.
Yeah.
If they charge me, I just get to fight in my 2 front ranks, so I essentially have the same amount of attacks. And if I charge, well, that's even better, because now I'm more effective as an infantry unit charging than other infantry units, which I think we're going to probably see a bit more of.
Yeah.
So it gives me that edge when I want to charge. Um, I agree, though. I think um, maybe it was an unneeded change, but I could kind of see where they might be worried about, frenzied units just being a little too strong, especially infantry ones with their extra attacks. If
Yeah.
it was just a permanent effect, not needing like a charge to have it proc, you can just kind of sit there with a frenzied unit and no one's going to want to charge that because they're going to get a foolish amount of attacks out the front. So I think this mitigates that potential and doesn't like all of a sudden make frenzy like this super powerful ability. So I think this is as much as disappointing as it is, because it'd be nice to have like a bajillion attacks by just kind of being defensive with frenzy. um I think it's fine. I don't think it's a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah, you're right. It's probably brought on by other changes they decided to make.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan.
So I actually like this one, but not as like an FAQ point, but like thinking about it as if we had gotten the rule book day one and this was just the frenzy rule and we'd never seen the other one, this would have totally made sense from like the game tries to get you to like act out an effect
Sure.
thing. Because yeah, like the amount of ink that was spilled online on people being like, I want to be frenzied, but I don't want to have to charge stuff because I just want to be like 2, 3, whatever attack models.
Yeah.
What if I cast Earthen Ramparts on them? What if I block them with skirmishers? Like, now you have Frenzy, you want to charge. And if you are certain types of infantry and you aren't charging, to Andrew's point, you can have effectively the same number of attacks through depth.
Yep.
But now, the rule makes you do the thing that the rule exists to represent. Like, the rule is not extra attacks. The rule is like frothing madman runs at stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. Like thematically, like there's if you read any I don't know Black Library books or whatever, there are no cases of crazy madman berserker waiting there and suddenly becoming berserk as he gets charged.
Being
You know? Like
being herded by the earthen ramparts.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess thematically it does make sense. Um, cool. Okay. The next one is there's been a change to how large targets work. So actually, we've gone back to a previous FAQ. Sorry, we've gone back on a previous FAQ. So before this one dropped, when you were shooting at a large target, everybody in the unit could shoot at it. Now we're back to the initial rules where it's 2 ranks or 3 ranks on hills that can shoot at the large target. I'm actually not really in favor of this one. Not because I care so much about this particular rule, but just because there's been a lot of changes all at once to how shooting units work. And I think they're probably the pendulum may have swung a little bit too far on your big shooting blocks. So yeah, I think this one is like a unrequired change, frankly. It's maybe a little bit too far when you take it into like uh, with all the other changes to shooting units at once. But yeah, I mean, on its own, it is what it is. But overall, the impact may be significant. I don't know, Andrew. What do you think?
Yeah, it seems like a weird step back. I mean, it's not, we'll get into it in a minute, but the changes to poison means
Yeah,
that like the big like fuck you block of, 40 plus cheap poison shooters deleting large targets, that is I think
gone. Yeah,
largely fixed now because of the changes to poison. So that paired with this just seems like it's really knocking range shooting down a peg.
yeah,
Um, which I don't think both of those things together should have happened. Like one or the other, sure, but not
you're
both.
right. Yeah,
Um,
you're right.
that
Yeah,
being
because
said, like it's kind of like a whatever to me too. Um, it just means that range shooting will have a different target anyway.
sure.
Um, I kind of would have liked to seen the old shoot in 2 ranks just permanent, but whatever.
Yeah, and I will say like it's I think shooting as much as people dislike it, it's an important tool to have in the ecosystem. And if you nerf it down too hard, or you hit it too hard, like other things, like it'll have unintended consequences. So, anyways, but I'll stop there. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like I'm kind of ambivalent to this one. Like I I get wanting to, like not nerf shooting too hard, but at the same time, even without poison, like giant 60 dude blocks of archers is also just an unfun experience to interact with. Um so
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird toss up, but the other thing too is that like large target was also put on so many things that maybe the solution here was to leave it the old way and FAQ some other things to like not be large targets, because like people were taking 60 poison archers or 60 plus poison archers to deal with 700 point dragons.
Yeah,
But then also it created an ecosystem where you couldn't bring a giant or a hippogriff.
yeah, because it
Uh,
was automatically deleted. Yeah,
exactly. So it's one of those like, as a hippogriff owner, I'm happy to only eat 2 ranks of archer shooting at my lord, who is only toughness 5. Um,
sure.
or so it's one of those like so many things were caught up in those sets of interactions that, you know, yes, we do need powerful counters to big scary things, but at the same time, the way that those were currently enabled was removing a whole suite of other options from
Yeah.
being able to show up on the board.
Yeah, and I think you raised like a good point indirectly, Ryan, in that I think they fixed a lot of things by in ways where they wouldn't have to remove any rules from anything, or they were quite reticent to remove, like let's say the large target from a
Yeah.
lot of things, or swift
Well,
stride, for instance, right? But that
like
led to some
why make
convoluted. Yeah,
yeah yeah why make 20 changes when you can make one?
exactly, right. It led to some really convoluted changes as a result, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're in agreement on this one. This one's a little bit more mitigated. Let's move on to the next one then. Andrew, impact hits.
Um, impact hits now happen before challenges are declared. I think this is pretty cool, actually. Um, I think it makes a lot of chariot options that you might not have seen before a little bit more juicy, especially as mount options for characters. Because as we'll see later on with the changes to infantry, like they're gonna stick around a lot more. So being able to, send chariots in and get a bit of combat res that isn't just locked into a challenge. If you get challenge locked with, a character is really gonna help out.
Yeah.
Um, so I think this is kind of a positive because I think it's gonna give some juice to chariots where I know you do see some, but I don't think they're as prevalent as they could be given the points investment you have for them anyway. So I really like this change. Um, and as someone who has suffered getting, you know, a character impact hit it in a challenge and dying before the actual challenge even happened, you know, I
Yeah.
I appreciate this rule.
Sure.
Um, the amount of times like my hag in the witches, because she's just toughness 3 with no armor, she kills anything she touches, but if she takes damage back she's dead.
Yeah.
Died to impact hits in a challenge just because I had no one else to accept the challenge. It's a feels bad for sure. um so for me, like, I like this change, but I also think it makes chariots a little bit more of a spicier choice for fighty characters.
Awesome. Ryan.
Yeah, I kind of like this one insofar as like it makes sense that impact hits like happen before everything. It does have some weird interactions, like if you do manage to get the impact hitting model in contact with a character or something, you can just like possibly obliterate them. There is also some weirdness with like there's a whole bunch of different things that all happen during step 1.1 of the combat phase. And the only thing this new rule says is that this has to happen before challenges are issued.
Yeah.
Um so I guess technically the order that things happen in would fall to the like active player for the turn. And what I'm getting at here is step 1.1 is also when you pick what weapon the combat will be fought with. And impact hits, like if the active player is doing the impact hits, technically you could do them before the other player gets to decide if they're using hand weapon and shield or a halberd.
Sure.
Technically, like it's just kind of
Technically.
a weird black hole.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Technically.
Um, now, if you fight about that, Andrew and I will kick you out of an event.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
because like yeah, I don't think it's intended that you should be able to impact hit people and be like, well, I did it before you could use shields. so you can't parry. Like, that's silly.
Yes.
But the way they wrote it, also possible.
Sure.
But don't do that.
I'm convinced this will get sorted out. Yeah.
Yes. But I
Um,
guess what I'm getting at is like, this is my side gripe, is like, an FAQ should clarify understanding and intent, not
agreed.
create more ambiguity.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. You're right on that bit. I think though, like overall I like this change. I think it's fun and thematic. It didn't make sense to me that you have a chariot barreling into the flank of your unit and crashing like this massive thing crashing into like bodies, and you're like, but wait, I challenge you, and everything ceases, and then suddenly you get like teleported to another dimension where the impact hits only affect a single person. So that all makes sense to me, and I'm good with it. And it like from a game perspective, it also creates some cases where if you're charging at smaller units, like you'll often see this on like 5-man cav units and stuff. You can kill the champion by targeting them with the impact hits, and then not having to fight the challenge at all. So it does impact gameplay that way. I think the limit is if a unit needs to have 5 rank and flank models for you to 5 or more for you not to be able to declare what you impact hit on. So on those smaller units, it can
Only
also
for
have some.
characters. You can still
Only
hit
for
the unit
characters. Okay.
champion.
Oh, perfect. So it also lets you just dodge that challenge then, and just so that's good. Not lose a turn of combat to a challenge. So that's fun. Okay, perfect. Ryan, you want to do impetuous?
Sure. After your last comments, I can now only imagine challenges as shadow duels from Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes, exactly.
But anyway, impetuous. So now impetuous is no longer a 4-up roll. It is a pass-failed leadership test. So if you fail the leadership test, you must charge. And units with warband can't apply warband leadership bonus to that roll, which is consistent with warband's inability to be applied to what's the word? Not reforming, restraining.
Yeah.
So makes sense. Um, you want to charge because you're a bunch of frothy goblins. I like this. Like, I like this mechanically. It's gonna suck for some armies. Um, and I think everything with impetuous might cost too many points.
Yeah.
Because of it. Um, but like, for example, like Errantry Crusade is now basically, like, especially because everything in the army is veteran,
Yeah.
is like never at fear of charging when they don't want to.
Yeah.
Um, where conversely, like goblins that don't have goblin wizards in their units, because apparently goblin wizards all have like insanely high leadership,
Yes.
are just gonna charge stuff. It's like it almost forces like it's interesting because this leans even more into the orcs and goblins like need to be a mixture of orcs and goblins, and like you need to bring the black orcs to quell the impetuosity almost. Otherwise you're gonna have leadership 5 units just like popping off, running at shit everywhere. Um, but anyway, I do think that this is a more elegant rule, way of having this rule exist. And it also does mean that like leadership, like, you can do more weird things, like use phantasmagoria to make people impetuous, and then use other spells that make leadership modifiers to try and like force people to charge into your like infantry brick or whatever. So it opens up more options.
Yeah. No, I generally I like this one too. I think like it adds a little bit of granularity to the rule. Like just to say that yes, sure, a dragon prince and a goblin are both impetuous, but like they're not the same. These two things are not the same, right? So I like that. I like that it adds granularity. I guess the reverse side is it impacts different things way differently. Like going back to my previous example, those poor goblin wolf riders just somehow got even worse now, and they were already pretty terrible. However, dragon princes got a lot better as a result. So there is that. However, like I'm still in favor of this change. I forget, Ryan, is it pistoliers or outriders that have impetuous?
Pistoliers.
Pistoliers, and are they good leadership or like 7 probably?
Probably.
Around that kind of area, right? So I guess for them it doesn't really change the metric much.
They're leadership 7 with a sergeant,
Okay, yeah,
but at the same time, they also, as we cover probably later in this episode, like Empire captains who you would
yeah,
slap with them are
yeah,
also
yeah,
now leadership 9.
yeah.
So
So okay, so suddenly maybe these guys have a bit more play now too. So
yeah, and also
yeah,
like inspiring presence still works here.
yeah.
So
Yeah. So it'll have a bunch of effects on different units. I think it's at least more interesting. I think everybody can agree than just a flat 4-up. What I will say, oh yeah, going back to your example of Errantry Crusade, Ryan. So I guess before, like it also it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because before you used to think, oh well, everything's going to be charging all the time because of impetuous in this army. However, now if you played a little bit more cagely because you don't think you're charging, and then you double
then you're
fail that
doing it
roll,
wrong.
and maybe, but then and you have the one random unit charge out in front of the army, that can also lead to some funny shenanigans. So uh, yeah, I'm there for it. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent to this one. Like it just seems. I think the rule's better this way. It kind of seemed weird that like on a 4-up, like your shit just charges. You had almost no control to it. At least now, like you could imp, engineer ways that like to offset it. So like even with the shitty wolf riders, that's not a bad bunker for a level 2 fucking goblin wizard with a magic missile now. So that you can use that to offset it. Like I don't think it's as bad as it could be. It does seem weird that you can't use like warband. Um, that's I don't know. To me, it seems like that's the point of warband anyway. Is like all used together. I guess have a more general sense of self, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But overall, overall, like I don't know. I don't think this is super huge.
No, it's not. I don't think it is either. Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one. This one is super huge, though, as far as how the game was played up until 2 or 3 days ago. So poison attacks have changed. Poison attacks now gives an attack +2 to wound rather than automatically wounding. So this one is massive, specifically for your poison shooting blocks. I actually think this, combined with the change to how shooting large targets works that we discussed a few minutes ago, combined with how you can't no longer have really really massive units because of the 500 point limit. I think all that together, a few things we'll cover later, is kind of sounds the death knell of your big poison shooting blocks. They've lost a massive amount of efficiency. Generally speaking, you're going to be wounding on 6s because a lot of your shooting will be strength 3 or sometimes strength 4 into monsters that are generally, or large targets that are generally T6. So this will bring you back down to like a 4 plus. But losing a significant portion of your shots already, and then the shots that you do have just wounding half the time when they hit 6s, I think is a really really rough go for your big poison shooting blocks, and potentially feels like it's quite heavy. Like I feel like either of those two changes would have been enough to bring things into back into balance. Together, I think it's kind of the end of your big poison shooting blocks, and I know that people generally don't like playing against them, but I do think, as I mentioned earlier, that they are an important way of, like, an important thing to have in the game currently, given all the prevalence of monsters. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think on this one, Andrew?
Yeah, I kind of don't like it. Again, I use a lot of poison with my beloved witches. So this definitely knocks them down a peg in terms of their damage output. I think also, as you said, like this plus the changes to shooting really hurts those types of builds, and maybe they were problematic, but I think one or the other in terms of the changes that affects those poison shooting builds would have been enough to bring them down. Because this also affects everything else in the game that has poison as well, not just
Yeah.
those stupid shooting bricks. Um, so yeah, I think it's still serviceable. I mean, getting a +2 to your moon roll is, I guess a fair trade-off if they had to change poison. Um, but I think there's still ways that like it's still going to be a useful ability to have, but it's definitely not as powerful as it used to be.
Yeah. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent on this one, but it's one of those like I wasn't running the things that were threatened by the giant poison shooting brick, nor do I have the things that could do the poisoning, so I just don't like it doesn't affect me in a ton of ways. Um, so I don't like I'm not gonna get too fussy about it. The only thing I did notice, like right off the bat, is for those situations where um you actually do hit the parts of the table where you just cannot wound.
Yeah.
Um, this like old poison automatically wounded on a roll of a 6,
Yeah.
where like now if you were to say take some kind of
Big flying bull, for instance, at T9.
yeah, like if you get something to toughness 9, which
Kevin,
is incredibly rare,
Yes.
um, but it's what's more common is you can have a spell put on you that drops your
Yes.
strength from 3 to 2, and
Yeah.
now you cannot wound a toughness 8 because you just can't. Um, and so like that's kind of a big difference where before like that curve was kind of smoothed.
Yeah.
Um, but like on my end, the only real takeaway is I guess I don't need to ever take the mantle of the damsel Elena ever again. Uh,
Sure.
like
Agreed.
that that's really it.
Okay, cool. So this one we're not super, yeah. Okay, mitigated, let's say. Andrew, stupidity has changed.
yeah, there's a few changes, although your show notes don't have all of them. But what you have highlighted is if you fail stupidity, uh, and you're a wizard, you cannot cast or dispel.
Yeah.
I think two is before you'd be able to move up to your movement. Now you have to stand in place, and you
Oh, I
can't
didn't
move
even
at
catch that.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a bigger aspect of this
Yes.
change. Um, yeah, it really makes stupidity a lot more detrimental to have because at least before you had a little bit of agency, basic. I don't think you can shoot either now when you fail stupidity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
So
can't hold objectives. Yeah.
okay, so there you go. So there's a lot of downside now if you fail stupidity, whereas before it's like cool, you don't get to charge, but you can kind of interact with the game in every other aspect. Now it's basically you stay in place, you don't move, you can't shoot, you don't do magic. You're just standing there picking your nose essentially. Um, so I think that hurts a lot of things. Um, that have stupidity, even more reliable leadership values on some of those stuff, like my dark elves. They're mostly, I think the 2 units I have that have stupidity are like leadership 9, so they reliably pass. But those few instances where they fail, like it's gonna be really painful. And then like I feel bad for stuff like trolls with their low leadership. Like sure they can get inspiring presence, and I think there's at least in the troll horde list, you can get like a reroll somehow, I think through a spell on that test. But even then, like it's gonna make those a lot less reliable units, whereas before it's like cool, like I won't charge, but I can at least move my force up into my opponent's face. Um, I can still do some shooting if I fail. Like, I think this is a big change. I'm not sure if it was a needed change. I don't think there was a lot of abuse going on with stupidity before, especially after they cleared up, exactly what it meant to make a move when you failed. A lot of people weren't sure. A lot of people tried to like march and stuff like that, or wheel. Like now it was when the change of just moving in a straight line, I think would have been good enough. Um, but I guess we'll have to see how this affects the game. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking it's a bigger deal than it is.
Fair.
Ryan?
Ryan.
Yeah, so yeah, it actually is very limiting. Like you have to hold if charged, can't shoot, can't cast, can't dispel, nor can you move.
Yeah.
Uh, and as we know, moving is any instance of displacing your model for any reason.
Yes.
So it gets weird where like you lose combat in a turn where you were stupid and got charged. And break and flee but can't move and therefore automatically are caught and die. Um,
Yikes.
like these things are not good. Um, so it's definitely rough. Um, the flip side is like I kind of get why they made it impactful because I found it was a rule that was almost so like non-relevant. Every time I've encountered stupidity, because the player could still move or just, hope to
Cast
get
spells.
charged and still fight in combat or whatever, it kind of was just like a nothing rule. Um,
Yeah.
although it was really funny when I want to say it was Hutch's Doom Bull made himself stupid at like the start of turn one.
Yeah.
Um, and then his unit of Minotaurs just kind of like lazily walked up the board, not doing anything, and I just ignored it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I agree this might be a bit harsh, but I do like that it's at least impactful when it happens.
Sure.
Um, I am also, just because I don't think we're covering it elsewhere, I'm gonna go out on one little like nitpicky tangent for the spends too much time looking at internet text crowd. Um, the new stupidity rule says the unit tests against the unit's leadership. Well, it referring to unit
Yeah.
leadership, which is not a specific model.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is another piece of this FAQ that says that if an ability says a model must test against its own leadership, the model must use the model's leadership value.
Yeah.
That does not apply to this situation, which is why you can still use things like Inspiring Presence or other buffs um, to take stupidity tests.
Yeah.
So just wanted to put that out there because there was a lot of people getting very concerned that like trolls became borderline unusable because they were conflating units and models when they were
Yeah.
reading this FAQ.
Yeah. Yeah. Fully agreed on that last part. That's a important clarification to bring specifically for, I don't know, the 8 troll horde players will be happy. Yeah, this one I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, the impact of stupidity is massive now. If you fail this roll, like no movement, no shooting, no charging, no spells or dispels, no holding objectives, and then when you flee, you're essentially automatically destroyed. That is a lot to go on. I mean, trolls are kind of safeguarded because they have a spell in Troll Horde, and then they can use other units' leadership, so it's not that bad. However, like I think, and Warriors of Chaos, you get Gaze of the Gods, so you at least have some protection. But I think Beastmen kind of are taking one on the chin here with their Gaze of the Gods. You got no rerolls on it, and they're generally a pretty low low leadership count army. So yeah, okay, I guess it's fun. It's thematic, but it can be a bit feels baddy when you have a big unit. You roll that dice, and then you're kind of stuck with this. But like, I guess I'm still kind of for it. I'll like people will play around it. It's fun. It's thematic, but it is extremely punishing. It's extremely punishing. Okay. Ryan, as our Bretonian player, there's been a change to Vanguard.
Yeah. So units that make a Vanguard move cannot declare a charge during their first turn. So that's a thing. I'm not super emotional about it. Like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to like body slam people with Pegasus Knights on turn 1 anymore, I guess. Just do it on turn 2. But I think it's overall a good change. Like, the number of people who were surprised at the fact that you could Vanguard move and then charge stuff over the last 18 months was not insignificant. So,
Yeah.
I think this is making it work the way kind of legacy players of the game expected it to. Another interesting note is that this interacts very awkwardly with different people's interpretations of how countercharge works.
Yeah. Didn't they say elsewhere that a countercharge is not a charge move?
A countercharge is a charge move. However, they have also FAQ'd in the past that if you cannot charge, you cannot countercharge.
Oh no, there's something in this FAQ about how it doesn't count as being a
Yeah,
charge or
because
something, but it has
because
yeah.
it doesn't
No,
count as a
so
charge move because people were trying to add Swift Stride dice
Okay,
to the
yeah,
D3+1.
sure.
so a counter charge roll is not a charge roll. It is a counter charge roll. So you don't add Swift Stride or anything that allows you to like
Yeah.
reroll your charge.
So
You
so
get all the benefits of counting as a charge, but it's not a charge. So you still
yeah,
get like
Right.
advances, you still get your initiative bonus or anything else that procs off of charging, frenzy. But you can't. It's not an actual charge roll. You're not making a charge move. It's a counter charge move.
yeah. So then
That
by
was
that raid
the
you can Vanguard and then countercharge turn 1.
But like, so here's where it gets weird though, is, for example, explicitly per the fact, you cannot countercharge if Earthen Ramparts has been cast on you because Earthen Ramparts prevents you from charging.
Sure.
weird.
Okay.
So this is the thing, right? Is like
Yeah.
in
Exception to the rule.
in a circumstance, you cannot countercharge because you cannot charge.
Yeah.
But
So
why would it be limited to only that circumstance?
I think I would just defer back to your previous comment, Ryan, of don't spend too much time thinking about these things. If the one
Yep.
for countercharge, if the one for Earth and Rampart says don't countercharge, take it in isolation.
Well, so but this gets back to the only FAQ question that came up when I played in the tournament in Toronto last year, which was the, if I have Miasmic Mirage cast on me, can I countercharge? So like all of these answers are linked together because they're all the exact same rules verbiage.
Yeah, sure.
Gross.
Although I think the only difference in this one is that Vanguard says cannot declare a charge, where Earth and Ramparts and Miasmic Mirage say you cannot charge.
Sure.
That's a weird one. Well,
All right.
anyway,
Well, something to
but
think about.
but the point is like whatever the result is, I think they should be consistent. Like,
Yeah.
but
And like to people listening to this last little segment and thinking like, oh my God, like how do we resolve this? Like the answer is easy. When it comes up in a game, if you and your opponent can't agree on it, you ask the judge and it'll be sorted out right away. Like
exactly, and it's one of those like we don't need definitive answers like
yes.
right this second. It's just I see this being a thing where I hit the table and go, before I make this Vanguard move, I do need to know how my opponent understands this works, because like if I can or cannot countercharge, it significantly changes where I will vanguard a unit to.
Agreed. Yeah.
But that's certainly an offline discussion to think about later.
Yeah. And yeah. Okay, cool. No, so generally speaking, so that discussion about miasmic mirage and countercharge aside, I think this is a good change. I'm very much in favor of it. So it prevents some feels bad interactions, specifically with the Peg Knights that you mentioned earlier, Ryan. Like early on in the edition, I had a game where like I didn't measure things out properly or whatever, and an enormous unit of Peg Knights and attendant characters charged my army turn one because they got to go first and they vanguarded. And yeah, that was a bit of a feel bad situation. Sure, I learned from it, but again, you're newer players or individuals who don't attend that many tournaments, and they rock up to the table, and within the first 5 minutes of the game, they're in a, let's say, extremely difficult position to claw their way back from. That like, I don't think that's conducive to necessarily a great play experience. So I'm not too fussed with this one being changed. I'm actually pretty happy it's changed, just because it prevents some of those. It feels like a bit of a gotcha moment for people. So yeah, I'm for it. And a little bit of the language needs to be changed to clarify some things with countercharge specifically. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's positive. Like you guys said, it gets rid of a lot of feels bad moments. Um, it also makes you have to think about your vanguard move and plan sort of a turn or two ahead, as opposed to just, well, I'm going to go full tilt at the closest target, and then next turn I'm charging. It really knocks down Peg Knights, which is kind of one of the big boogeymen in this in the meta. So it makes you have to, think about how you use that unit as opposed to just push forward and go. So I think overall it's a positive, um, and kind of tones down some of the shenanigans that vanguarding could accomplish before.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next one, which is about charging skirmishers. So, skirmishers may now only declare a charge against a unit that is visible to more than half of its models. This is an interesting one. I'm surprised that I haven't seen almost any Discord on this discourse correction on this online because of how prevalent skirmishers are. So yeah, I think the impact of this one remains to be seen. I'm not overly fussed one way or the other in terms of if I like it or not. That being said, like my gut feeling is that this will be an impactful rules change. It won't matter too much for your units that are like your large targets because of how you draw line of sight to large models. That being said, like I've seen quite a few situations, just like anecdotally of uh, charging units of skirmishers where you had a few models peeking out of around the corner of an impassable structure, or peeking out around from behind another unit or something, and declaring a charge. So I mean, this again, I think it limits the number of feels baddie sort of gotcha type moments that can come up. It also makes it more I guess it is a little bit more like thematic and appropriate that if not like if the one random guy can partially see an enemy, that they don't all go running after it. Um, so yeah, I am, I guess, in favor of this one, and I think it is potentially more impactful than people think. But like it remains to be seen exactly. I think how often this will come up. Andrew.
I agree with what you said. There is another facet of this where models in a skirmishing unit cannot see through other models in the skirmishing
Yeah,
unit.
agreed. Yeah,
So positioning will matter. Like the amount of times I've faced a Bretonian player who just kind of pushes a blob of peg knights in my face, but there's only like maybe two of them that can actually have line of sight just because he, conga lined them a bit or something. I think it's gonna matter in terms of like positioning on the board now and
yeah,
forcing, you to make sure that at least 50% of those models can see. So I think that's a little bit more important than sort of like the one guy peeking around a corner and then everyone kind of charges out. Because even stuff like, well, I was gonna say Sisters of Avalorn, but they probably don't want to be charging anything. But like, I've seen a shit ton of blobs of those as well.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's gonna force you to have to position better when you take like sort of mass skirmishing infantry.
yeah. It will. So
Otherwise,
if you do take a mass skirmishing infantry unit, it actually becomes very difficult for them to charge anything that's not a large target.
right.
Yeah,
Unless you do like a weird like checkerboard sort of positioning, but that's
yeah,
probably not the best way to do it. So I think it will force players to be a little bit less like ad hoc with how they use their skirmishers, and they're gonna have to plan things out a little bit more in advance when they use them, which I think is a positive thing because right now it's kind of like, well, skirmishers kind of just do what they want. They move the
yeah,
way they want. They charge the way they want. Like now, it's kind of bringing them back into the parameters of the game and making you have to think tactically on how you use those units. So overall, I think it's a positive thing, and it's not like super game breaking for those skirmishers. Like I don't think it knocks them down a peg at all. I think it just means you have to be smarter with how you use them.
yeah. Fully agreed. Ryan.
Yeah, I have no significant problem with these changes. Like the more than 50% thing, it'll get finicky with certain units and unit sizes for sure, especially because a lot of people play skirmishers incredibly carelessly.
Yeah,
Um, so like yeah, I spend a lot of time telling people that they can't shoot through their own models.
sure.
Um, so that's a thing. Um, but yeah, it's like I don't from my experience with like 5 to 7 like Pegasus Knights and stuff, like I don't usually have them in a formation where half of them wouldn't be able to see unless there's terrain in the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I think that'll be the big one. But I also think, especially with the change to like Vanguard and stuff, that you might see more like solo Pegasus character run or Royal Peg character running near five to
Mhm.
six Pegasus Knights instead of in. Um, but we'll
We'll
see.
see. Yeah, yeah. We'll see. Okay, cool. So the next one is also an impactful one. Regeneration saves have been changed. So regen saves are now rolled after each individual wound is lost. So for example, if you were to take D3 wounds, you would roll D3 regen saves after that number was allocated or rolled or whatever. And also, regen saves now apply to effects where previously a wound was just lost. So, for example, on dangerous terrain, you get to roll a regen save now. It's created a bunch of discussion online about things like Monster Slayer, for instance, but I think parking all of that kind of silliness for a second. I think this makes which will get sorted out in terms of like GW will address. I'm convinced. I think it like in general, I like this change. I think it makes regen much more reliable than it was before. Not that you'll necessarily get more out of it, just that it's less swingy, right? So, before you rolled let's say on the 3 wounds you would roll a single regen save and either save all 3 or none, obviously, but now you're generally going to save one of the 3, so things will, because regens are usually 5 plus, so you'll save one of the 3, which sort of evens out your averages and makes things more, again, reliable. I don't hate that. So yeah, I'm not super fussed about it one way or the other, but I do like that it gives you a little bit more reliability, because there is a downside to regen, of course, which is that it stacks, like it does add combat res points. So yeah, slightly in favor of this one, I guess. Andrew.
Yeah, I don't think it's the worst change. Maybe maybe it's a little too far on being able to be used on things like on instability.
Yeah, agreed.
Um, but I'm kind of not strongly opposed to it either. Um, the more downside I find is like the whole multiple wounds thing. I know it kind of makes more sense to do it this way now, but I think it's going to make weird situations where it's like, okay, now I'm gonna have to, on one wound models, you're gonna have to now individually roll each. Like, say I have an ogre blade, I do 3 wounds to a
Yeah,
model. Now you have to individually roll. So I think that's just gonna slow shit down if you have to do that over multiple targets.
Yeah.
Which is kind of annoying, but otherwise, like I'm kind of fine with these changes.
Agreed.
Yeah,
It will slow things down, and there's a few changes in this FAQ that we've covered and that we are going to cover that will slow things down. So it'll add a few minutes to your game overall, I think. Not this one, but like taken together, right?
sure.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on the regen changes?
So I like how it works, like after the wounds are lost, even though, yes, it might be a little bit slower to go through and, like, if I'm attacking skeleton warriors with my frontier axe and they're all sitting there rolling 2 regen saves to
Yeah.
just wind up killing one model. Um, sure. Um, the only there's 2 things I don't like about this, and they're mostly like editorial or editing problems. Is
Hmm.
one, there was a bunch of other FAQs related to regen that were deleted, presumably on purpose.
Yeah.
Um, which is why, for example, we're even having this discussion of taking multiple regen saves for 1 wound models.
Yeah.
Um, because they deleted the FAQ that said don't do that.
Hmm.
And secondly, if this had said after a model like suffers a wound, like basically if they used an extra like couple words
Yeah.
and said
Cleared it
suffers
up.
instead of loses, and something about after warden after the other 2 types of saves are used or whatever, um we would solve all of the problems of like regen suddenly applying to things that it didn't apply to before. And like I don't really care about regen applying to like dangerous terrain, but regenning crumble is just like weird
Yes. Yeah.
and it doesn't feel intended.
No.
Uh
And yeah, that's why I said like I think these things need to be addressed. Yeah.
yeah. But my only concern is that we have to live 3 to 6 months of them just not being addressed but they're also like stunningly obvious.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe. Hopefully
so
not.
yeah,
Hopefully not.
because yeah, it gets real weird with like, but also at the same time, it could be intended because of the sheer amount of combat res that you can create off of regen now. So
Sure.
it's like
Yeah.
weirdly,
Yeah.
like super weirdly, um what are they, deepwood not deepwood scouts, wildwood rangers
Hmm.
suddenly got like weirdly good at
Skeletons.
fighting skeletons because the skeletons cause fear, so the wildwood rangers are now all multiple wounds too and
Nice.
get +1 attack.
Sure.
Universe.
So your wildwood rangers are just like massacring skeleton warriors
As it should be.
because
That
of
is
this.
incredibly niche.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's just really
Um,
funny.
yeah, it is. It is. So one thing, Ryan, you did sort of mention offhand there that I want to touch
Yeah.
on because this one has like pissed me off and ground my gears a little bit is uh, GW deleting FAQ entries and not letting us know, and then just expecting that somehow we all collectively just internalize that one of the 500 entries that they had in the FAQ is no longer there and therefore should no longer be like, like considered or whatever. Like, please, if you're listening to this somehow, GW, make sure you mark when you delete things. Otherwise, like most people don't know the facts by heart to be able to immediately tell you that like these things which impact each other have partially disappeared. Okay, so regen saves again, sort of mitigated on that one. A super impactful change that I think a lot of people were excited for. Next, Andrew, changes to infantry.
So this applies to infantry and heavy infantry only. Um, they get 3 new rules. So the first one is press of battle. Unless the unit has charge, infantry now fight in 2 ranks, or 3 if they have supporting attacks from a source. They also have massed infantry. When resolving combat, if a side has infantry and a higher unit strength, it adds +1 to its combat res. Also, they get the parry rule. So models that decide to use hand weapon and shield in close combat gain a +1 to their save, up to a maximum of 3+. So this is kind of the biggest change in the FAQ, I think. This is what's going to hopefully make infantry a lot more viable in the game. First of all, infantry blocks are going to be a lot more killy when they are charged, which is always good. Oftentimes, when an infantry unit was charged, say by cavalry, they'd usually get no attacks back just from having their front rank wiped out. So this is going to allow them to at least be a little bit more combat effective. And then massed infantry rule is going to be able to allow them to generate a bit more combat res, which is always good, especially because, if you're taking larger infantry blocks, it's going to make them more defensive against things like Cav, who probably won't be outnumbering them. Then the parry rule just kind of makes sword and board a little bit more of a juicier choice to take, as opposed to if you have it before, if you had the option between sword and shield or sword and spear, you'd almost always take the spear because at least you can fight in the extra rank. Like, there was no downside to picking the spear over the sword. Now it gives you that bit of a choice of like, okay, do I want my units to have a little bit better armor save, or do I want them to be able to fight an extra rank, or whatever the weapon they had was. So I think all in all, this is good, especially with some of the other changes that we have covered and will cover in this FAQ. I think it gives infantry blocks now a place in the game. It's not like they're going to be all of a sudden like on the same level, excuse me, as big cav blocks or dragons, but they will have a place. And they're going to be a little bit more effective now, I find. So I think this is a really positive rule. This is going to open up list building for every single army in the game now again. So I think we're kind of like on a frontier of what a meta list for each faction is going to look like, just because of this change, and then also taking into account like the rules in the match play guide, which focuses on having blocks of infantry, blocks of core troops, actually holding spots or objectives on the field. So I think this is huge. Ryan?
Yeah, I really like all of these changes. Press of battle makes like charging infantry an actual like choice. Like I was already looking at having to move to 9 to 10 man lances of knights. And this kind of solidified it. Like the 6-man unit of knights bounced off a lot more things than I'd like to admit that it does. And
Mhm.
now that they'd be fighting in like 2 ranks and shit, um, especially like chaos warriors would
Yeah.
like let alone like state troops or whatever, but like something that can actually tank a hit from a lance, being able to
Yeah.
also fight in 2 ranks.
Yeah. Your
It
dwarves, your chaos dwarves, your black orcs, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
exactly. I would put a caveat in here because a lot of people have missed it in discussion. Is the press of battle also only applies to a regular or heavy infantry unit arrayed
Yes.
in combat order.
Mhm.
Um, so that means they cannot be in marching column. and that skirmishers that have ranked up because they're in combat, they are still in skirmish formation,
Yes,
just a
because of another
closed
FAQ
ranked
answer. Yeah.
version of it.
Yeah.
So they do not adopt combat order. It is something that only exists for open and closed order. So just as a point of clarification.
Yeah. So skirmish infantry kind of get left a little bit behind by this for sure.
Yes. And then massed infantry, again, like unit strength, you're mostly gonna outnumber, but like if someone starts shoving like 10 Jade Lancers at you, who knows?
Yeah.
And then Parry's cool. I like it. There's a few things that kind of get left out that want to fight with a hand weapon and shield and just like aren't gonna benefit.
Mhm.
Which is whatever. But again, like one of the biggest gripes from early in the edition was like Chaos Warriors felt expensive and terrible.
Yeah.
Um, but now, yes, they're still expensive, but now,
Less terrible. Yeah.
but like heavy armor, shield, hand weapon,
Yep.
ensorcelled hand weapon for AP -1. They're natively strength 4. Like
Yep.
they actually feel like the thing they're supposed to be. And even stuff like Foot Knights with these rules is now, I wouldn't say good, but
Certainly better than before.
certainly better than before. And like with the missions, might have a place now.
Yep.
And when we get into like the weapons changes and things like that, like again, my Foot Knights in combat now have 3-up saves and possibly a ward depending on the circumstance.
Mhm.
And I go back to, slap like a level 1 damsel in there or something, and
Yep.
I can
Very
do all
hard.
kinds of weird things.
Mhm.
Um, so I like it. I like it a lot, and I think the staying power that you'll be able to get out of little bricks of infantry. Again, like, and you still need to play smartly to mitigate things like first charge and whatnot, because yeah, you fight back in 2 ranks, but like if I break you because you have no rank bonus anymore, um, it's not great. So
Yeah.
uh, like it doesn't make infantry amazing, but
No.
it does make them easier to use,
Agreed.
which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for my part, there has been a lot of discourse online about this, and how impactful it is and how it's going to change the game. And I'm not entirely convinced, unfortunately. I'm going to be a bit more of a naysayer than you guys are on this one. First of all, I think the most impactful set of changes in this FAQ is to magic, not to infantry. But that's just like a personal opinion right now. We'll see if it gets validated or not. I think that how the missions work, are going to do more for the viability of infantry as like a piece you want to bring to the battle, than these rules on their own. Um, but like taken together, of course, I think infantry are definitely better than they were like 2 or 3 days ago. However, I think people are really overestimating the impact of these rules, and the reasons why is like, so the things like, there's not a lot of, if you think back to your games, the number of infantry on infantry fights is quite limited, actually. And so, the things that wanted to be charging your infantry still get the ability to pick and align and charge them, where same as before, right? There's no step up, either, right? So you're still losing attacks, and ultimately, like, whether or not you attack my, I don't know, Black Orc Warboss on Wyvern with 10 or 5 shitty strength 3 weapon skill 3 attacks will make little to no difference. I
I
know that
attack
they're like,
with my 1 wound sergeant
yeah, sure, exactly,
and
right?
then win on combat res. Like
Sure, but like, no, but my point is, like, that's not a factor of these rules, right? That's a factor of how static combat res works, right? Like,
which is
and
one of these rules.
I guess my point, Ryan, also is that, like, the feeling I have with this is this will like unintended consequence here is this widens the gap significantly between your elite and your regular infantry. Like some of the models that we mentioned before, your Chaos Warriors, certainly your chosen Chaos Warriors, a lot of the Dwarf units, Chaos Dwarf infantry, some of the Elven infantry also, especially because they often get to strike first. Like those guys have taken a big jump, I think, in their ability to punch up, or at least punch somewhat equally to their relative value. But I think your generalist, like state troop type infantry is still in a really shitty place despite these changes. I get, they have the Griffin banner, things may be a little bit different, but overall, I think people are definitely overestimating the impact of these rules. Still, I will say, like as I mentioned, infantry are a lot better than they were, but they're like, this is not 8th edition, right? Like things have not reverted back to that level.
I
Yeah,
guess
Ryan?
my point with infantry is more, it's not just this errata to page 190 that is like it's the like holistic combination of the changes to magic, the changes to how things interact with monsters,
Mhm.
these things, the changes to challenges, the changes to weapons, all of it together has a bigger impact.
Yeah,
Is more where I'm at.
yeah,
Also, the change to like what is considered close order.
Yeah, that too. Because
yes, with
also
the
like
unit strength. Yeah.
Because also, like, for example, a unit like Chosen is actually only benefiting from the press of battle because they're probably not going to have enough. They're not going to be able to afford to have enough models to be out significantly outnumbering stuff. And
Uh,
because they're in full plate, they don't benefit from the parry rule.
sure for
So, like,
parry,
they're
but
getting
like,
one of
yeah,
three rules.
yeah, but I think massed infantry, like even if you've got 15 or something, is going to come up more often than you think, um, because no monster has that level of unit strength. But like regardless, I think people. So I guess my gut feeling is that regardless of these changes, infantry's main role is now going to be to win missions and sit on objectives rather than win combats, or punch up or cause a significant amount of wounds to the things they're fighting. For some of the reasons I mentioned before, I'm super happy to be proven wrong. But we've mentioned many times on this show how movement is the most important thing in this game. Infantry is still not moving any faster,
But I
unfortunately.
guess what I'm getting at is if the conceit of how you win a mission is by scoring the points in the mission,
Yeah,
infantry doing that and being able to move to take and remain on an objective despite someone, charging into them is exactly the place we want them to be in. Because 2
so,
days ago, they would
yeah.
move up to the objective and then like a 6-man unit of knights would charge them and they would break and flee and die.
No, so
And
we're agreeing. We're coming
yeah,
like at this from two different directions. I think they're very good at holding objectives. I think people are vastly overestimating their combat power, is what I'm getting at, right? And if you see these changes and you think now's the time to pull up my 3 big units of state troops and go win battles like I used to in 8th edition, you're still going to be very disappointed, is what I'm getting at, right? Not that these guys can't play the
yeah.
mission; they're the right tool to play the mission.
But that's the thing.
Sorry.
It's like
Yeah.
they are still a fundamentally defensive element. If you were
Yeah.
to look at like it's
Yeah.
they do better at taking being attacked. I
Yes.
guess. Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. Which is
Okay.
unfortunate for things like Black Orcs and Foot Knights, where like Furious Charge is like, I want to charge you, but also I don't.
Great swords. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So I think all those infantry units that are like thought of as little hammer units, those ones are the ones that are going to be especially disappointed. Um, yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's move on to this one. Ryan, look out, sir.
Yes. So look out, sir. Now triggers only when there's 5 or more rank and file members of the unit, and only if those are the same troop type as the character they're seeking to protect. And additionally to that, if you have a character that is not the same troop type as the unit they're embedded in, that character is targetable by enemy shooting. So the big takeaway here is like, no more putting like a prophetess on a unicorn inside a unit of like peasants, or a chariot inside a unit of infantry, because
Yeah.
someone's just going to shoot it with a cannon from the other side of the table and kill it. Um, and you won't be able to bounce the hit anywhere. Um, that's really it. Like, it's, again, this is I think just a quality of life thing to make Lookout Sir work the way most people probably felt it should have. Like, character protection based on proximity for lone characters is based on being the same troop type. So it seemed odd that, like, you know, putting your 6 foot tall unicorn with a person on top of it inside of a bunch of dudes, and suddenly they were like jumping into the air to catch arrows with their chests. Uh, I guess so. I'm for it. It works. It keeps things in their lane to an extent. Um, Feels less gamey. What
Yeah.
do you guys think?
Yeah, this one I'm on the fence on. Like there are cases where it's super where it was abused in the like how it used to work, and there are cases where I'm sad to see it go. Like I'm I'm fine with, for instance, having a prophetess leading a unit of peasants. Like that's cool to like I think that's cool and thematic. Like I guess it becomes weirder when you have a chaos lord on demonic mount hanging around with a bunch of skin wolves and getting all their which has been corrected elsewhere, but like getting all their benefits feels perhaps weirder. But like it's kind of a broad brush that I'm kind of for and against depending on the case, which I get is super hard to for GW to sort of deal with a single answer. But yeah, I'm kind of on the fence. Like there are some immersion breaking things that it makes sense that they're no longer there, and then there are things that I think we've maybe removed a little bit of immersion based on how the army would function. So no strong feelings one way or the other. Um, Overall, it's probably better for the game. I think Lookout Sir being on a 2+ is slightly perhaps too effective. So removing it from some things is good. It makes sense. Andrew.
Yeah, I think you guys mostly covered it. Like, it kind of sucks for some stuff, but I do like that there's now caveats around like how many models you can have and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think it's kind of a neutral change for me at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm the same, Andrew. Okay. The next one is interesting. So in challenges, so mounts can no longer attack if the opponent in the challenge is slain before their initiative step. So I guess this limits your ability to stack up combat res and challenges. So again, it adds a little bit of that staying power and ability of especially I think infantry to win fights when they challenge out an opponent, and then that opponent kills the sergeant immediately with their rider, and then can't use all their dragon stomps, for instance, to rack up combat res points. It I guess it kind of makes sense to me. The mechanic of winning, adding a ton of combat res by hitting an opponent that's been dead for a few initiative steps, always like narratively and thematically was strange. So limiting that a little bit, I'm kind of in favor of actually. So yeah, I again generally neutral on this one, but I guess I think it's a positive change for the game. It just means that you've got to think a little bit more about how you declare your charges against how you declare your charges when you're going to get challenged out. Make sure that you have supporting units and you don't have a single unit charging, that kind of stuff. So forces you to think a little bit more, and it changes to think that a thing I think was not too immersive in how it played out. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a big positive. It really takes dragons. Well,
Yeah.
dragons will be the main one who suffers from this, but it really takes them down a peg. Um, They won't be able to just auto generate max combat reses, which is what they usually did. And win combats that way. Now they have to be a little bit more of a support piece for other units. They're still very powerful, but now they can't just kind of solo everything they touch anymore.
Yeah.
They have to kind of pick their combats a little bit more um, favorably for themselves. Otherwise, they will just kind of lose due to combat res. So I think this is a big positive change. I think it's almost as big as the changes for um infantry, just because
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
like between the Peg Knights and Dragons, like those are kind of the two biggest boogeymen that we saw in the meta before. Um and this really knocks down their effectiveness as a piece because they're not just going to be like I push forward and whatever it touches I'm going to auto win just because I'm going to generate max combat res or
Yeah.
combat whatever
Yeah.
and win. So I think this is a really good change and probably something that should have existed since the beginning.
Agreed. Like this makes chart like running monsters with no support a very dangerous prospect. Like
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, no, I like this for kind of that exact last point you made is depending on the target, you now need to actually like gang up on things. You can't
Yeah.
just like because there's a lot of people out there that, maybe they're hoping the terror check pushes you away. And so they declare that charge with the dragon and then you don't flee. And now they're fucked.
Yeah.
So like they do need to actually, prepare for that eventuality and have, maybe a nearby cavalry unit to also throw in there and things like that. Like it makes it more of a game. Like it's not just I throw dragon at you and
Yeah.
if
It's
you
eating a
don't
unit
have
a turn every turn. Yeah.
yeah, if you do not have sufficient static combat res because you literally don't have the ability to get more, you lose. Oh, sweet. Um, so I do like that change. Um, I like how that interacts with things. And I also like that like there's even chances for like a lance of 10 knights or something to be able to commit their champion into not necessarily like a dragon but like a maybe against like a noble on a griffin or something.
Hmm.
And if he only takes like 1 or 2 wounds,
Still win. Yeah.
they still win combat like with their musician, right? Like
Mhm.
so it's a anyway, like I like that kind of ability before because like honestly, everyone was frequently quite shocked that I was like never declaring or really I wasn't doing challenges with most of my Bretonian stuff unless it was like super advantageous for some reason
Mhm.
because more often than not it was actually like more negative for me to have my like knight champion issue a challenge um, and then get overkilled to the fucking
Yeah.
moon and back and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think like we mentioned this, but just to super clearly spell it out, like stomps, I think were often the largest source of combat res in these kinds of combats challenges. So this is the thing you're going to be losing the most often, and I think that's probably like it is very positive. So
I heavily look forward to the wizard's tail or to the wyvern's tail and the Taurus's
yes,
goring horns just like
yes.
fucking over its rider amazingly.
Wow,
um
I feel like I'm targeted right now, but yes. Agreed. It will screw them up for sure. Okay, so let's go to another fun one. Andrew, weapons.
Okay, so they made a few changes to a bunch of basic weapons. Um, Also, kind of the best part of this is you can select different weapons for use in combat at the start of each combat rather than only once until combat is ceased. So what that means is I think it's during the step one of
Yeah,
combats.
1.1.
Um, yeah, 1.1, you can choose whatever weapon your model is equipped with, and then you can change that every turn to suit whatever needs you have. Um, Also, for flails and morning stars, the strength and armor bane now only apply when the unit is charging, um, and only to the models that it charged itself. So if there's a situation where you charge a unit and then maybe something else charges in, how would that
Hmm.
work? I guess just like with detachments, right? Like counter charges.
Oh, you mean
Um,
for the? Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
uh, your bonuses for charging only apply to the unit that you actually charged,
Yeah,
not something else you might be in combat with.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's so that tends to come up if you win combat, and then you pursue, and so you're in your opponent's turn. You count as having charged, but then they charge your unit with a second unit, and before you could use
Gotcha.
your lances on that second unit that charge you in the rear or something. Now
Yeah,
you can't anymore. Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, cool. Halberds, they now have AP2 uh, against models that the wielder charged this turn. Lances, the strength and AP bonus only applied to units that were charged this turn. Um, so again, it prevents you from using the lance against something that charged you.
Hmm.
These are all, I think, good quality of life changes. I think it's a bit of a downside for the flails and morning stars. It's not like they were huge power pieces, and now you only get the bonus when they charge. Kind of sucks, but I think the bonus to like halberds and lances is very nice. And being able to switch, your weapons around between combats is really cool. The first kind of example that comes to mind is like, you push up your unit, um, and then they get charged. So for that first turn, you're gonna want like sword and shield just to be defensive. Maybe, you know, deal with like a cav unit that has lances, so you got that little bit of better armor save. And then on a subsequent turn, if you're still alive, you pull out your spears for extra attacks or um, halberds for just a bit of extra strength. So there's like a lot of ways you can kind of
Yeah.
engineer situations where you can swap weapons between rounds and kind of get the best of what you need in that situation. So I think it's a really cool rule. Gives you a little bit more options. It makes thinking about the choices of equipment you put on your units more like impactful and meaningful, but also gives them a lot more flexibility as well. Ryan?
Yeah, no, I like this. The ability to change weapons on a round by round basis is great. And like again, I keep using Foot Knights as an example because they're a unit I've been toying with for a long time, but like being able to waffle between hand weapon and shield when I've been charged, and then I win combat, pursue, and get furious charge, great weapon attacks, on the turn that I smash into someone else is pretty cool. Um, the changes to flails, morning stars, halberds, I just don't actually understand. Like, okay, cool. They get extra AP when I charge. I don't know why. Like, it's a pole arm.
Sure.
It's offensive weapon, but
Mhm.
okay, whatever. Um, but the bonus for lances and stuff, like it just kind of they reworded it in such a way that cleared up a lot of like other FAQs that now don't need to exist because of just restating it, and also fixes the you can't lance people who are behind you problem. um I'm less worried about the flails and morning stars. Like for the sake of consistency, I like the fact that these things are all like pegged off of charges and not some were charges and some were in the first round of combat. Because I'm not gonna lie, you probably have more charges in a turn or in a game, sorry, than you have first rounds of combat.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like specifically the change to being able to change weapons in between rounds of combat. I think this lets you do some really fun stuff and have like a a level of agency over the fighting that feels good as a player. So all kinds of situations where, for instance, you the turn you get the charge off, you use your great weapon, sorry, because you have the bonus to initiative, and then you do your damage, and then you switch to hand weapon and shield after to sort of survive that second round where you do strike second, or where you get flank charged on your opponent's turn or rear charged. Like, I think that's all a good level of decision making and player agency to throw in. So I really, really like this change. Changes to flails and halberds, like, I'm not too worried about. Like, I'm neither here nor there. Like, I'm not super bothered by it. I really like the change specifically to lances, and Ryan there, the consistency thing. So I'm fine if they're all like that. But I think there was a lot of I've had it in because I play Bretonians so often. There's been a lot of strange situations where you get the charge off on something on their rear or side, and then you feel great about that, and then suddenly you realize that, oh, not only did you got the charge off, but not only did they strike first because they also count as having charge for whatever reason, and they get to use the lances against the unit that charged them in the rear. That just always felt strange, like counterintuitive, and feels batty. So I'm happy that that kind of interaction has been corrected. Like, there is a notable difference on charging something with a lance pointed forward and then getting hit in the back of the unit by something else after. So I'm super in favor of these weapon changes. I think they're great overall. Cool. Ryan, you want to take the next one on armor value?
Yes. So the maximum armor value of chariot, monster, and war machine unit types is now 3+. Infantry and cavalry remain 2+. And as before, any bonus, regardless of the source, that would improve a model's armor further has no effect. So there's no like, I'm 3+, but I have another -1, so it can ignore the first pip of AP. Not a thing. It's capped at 3+. So that's cool. It means your dragons aren't getting up to a 2+ or anything, or your chariot, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's like they can still triple stack saves. Like 3+,
Yeah,
5+, 5+
is
is
essentially
still
the same. Yeah.
like, yeah, especially because most of what was attacking you was like AP 1 or 2 anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's cool. I don't think it's earth shattering. But it's it's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess from my perspective, like GW targeted the wrong thing here. Your dragon going from a 2+ to a 3+, if it still has a 5+, 5+ after, is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but almost irrelevant. So I think the thing that ought to have been targeted if we wanted to reduce the resiliency of these models is their ability to stack 3 saves together, not necessarily their ability to go from a 3+ to a 2+, usually against like shooting also. So yeah, I think we're kind of targeting the wrong thing. I'm not against it, but I don't think it matters much, frankly, on your 10 wound dragon that suddenly he's like, or 7, 8, 9 wound dragon, whichever one you have there, that suddenly is 3+, 5+, 5+. So whatever. Andrew.
Yeah, this is kind of just a whatever change. Like, sure, I guess it helps a bit, but there's other things they could have done with saves.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in a world where, poison shooting blocks are no longer really a thing. I'm fine with a 3+, 5+, 5+ on the dragon. Okay, moving on to spell changes. So there's been a significant amount of spell changes. So the first one, I think, which everybody or a significant, anyways, the majority of the player base will be very happy to see and hear about is Pillar of Fire now scatters instead of being a you pick the direction of. I get that it makes the spell no longer as unique and it's just basically another vortex, but that spell has been used and abused so much that we were all ready for it to change. TMP, Travel Mystical Pathways, was another spell, which was the other, I think, second problematic spell, and a further nail in the coffin of big shooting poison blocks. Travel Mystical Pathways is now wholly within 12 rather than within 12, which matters a whole lot for your, the bigger the unit gets. And I think is a change most people will be happy to see come along. Limits the amount of jank that you can pull off, especially with very wide units or very very big units. I think this is another very positive change. Both of those are very positive. Most vortexes in the game have been modified to no longer be dangerous terrain. They are now difficult terrain. I think this one I'm sort of less in agreement with. Reason being that, if I'm going to walk into a pillar of fire, that doesn't feel like an open field or a wood. It feels like something that's very dangerous. So I don't know thematically if it makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
You're skipping part though. They're all changed to be difficult terrain, but they also now do the vortex's effect when you move through it, which they
Sure.
didn't do before.
Yeah, sure. Yes, you're right. But nonetheless, I still think that if I'm walking into a pillar of fire, like this should be a dangerous terrain thing, not a difficult one. And I would
D3 plus 3 AP minus
sure.
2 hit.
I don't know, but regardless.
Yeah.
Like I'm not ripping my my shirt off like because of this one, but it is what it is. And then spellcast, like that's not the hill I'll die on. And then spellcasting values have been modified. Like generally speaking, your 2 or highest casting value spells in each lore have been dropped by 1 to account for wizard spellcasting levels having been reduced, or sorry, the bonus that they get from their level having been reduced. So usually you'll see spells go from like an 11 to a 10 or a 10 to a 9 depending on the lore. I will say spells don't appear, at least from my read, there's nothing that appears to have been dropped by more than 1. However, a lot or the majority of wizards have had their spellcasting bonus dropped by 2. So what that means is spellcasting is generally sorry.
I was
Okay,
just
yeah.
moving.
Okay, sorry. So I think spellcasting has been further reduced in power just because it's now just mathematically harder to cast spells even before you consider the reduction in the bonus there. So yeah, I think all of these I'm in favor of. Yeah, a little bit divided on the difficult versus dangerous terrain for vortexes, but that is such a small issue that it doesn't even matter. Like I think overall, change to Pillar of Fire, change to Travel Mystical Pathways, and then reducing how often you're going to see those big spells come off are all very very positive things. So I'm very very happy with these changes. Andrew.
Yeah, I think this is all fine. I think a lot of people used to argue that Pillar of Fire should have been random to begin with, so
Yeah.
this kind of takes its efficiency down quite a bit, but I still think it's a decent spell to cast, and have out on the board kind of mucking about. The rest of this is, I think decent changes. Um, I think I really like the change to vortexes now, having their effects proc when you go through them as well.
Yeah.
I think that ups their efficiency and ability to be used more, because before, they already were unreliable to control, and then if it didn't actually hit a unit, they were kind of just like a nothing. It's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna walk through it now. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
So now, people are gonna have to make that choice of like, okay, do I want to go through it and suffer the effect, but at least get out of the way, or do I just kind of hold off and hope it goes in another direction? So I think that's like the best part of this change.
Yeah. Agreed. Ryan.
Ryan?
I actually really like all of this because, like, obviously adjusting the casting values was necessary when you eliminated like casters that cast at +4 from the
Mhm.
majority of the game. Um, Travel mystical pathways being wholly within, just generally less abusive, and being able to move anything 12 inches without it marching is still awesome.
Mhm.
Uh, Pillar scattering, cool. Like, yeah, it's just nice for consistency. Um, and doing the effects multiple different ways.
Yep.
Also, like, you know, cool. Like now you're not in this weird space of like the vortex does different things in different phases of the game. Another thing I'm going to tag onto this that we didn't talk about too is magical vortexes. If they end
Yes.
with any part
Yep.
of the template over a unit,
Mhm.
um, now move by the shortest path possible to not be on top of any model spaces.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
no longer do you like go in the front of a unit and like shoot out the back of it. Quite frequently, if you like clip the corner of a unit, the shortest way out might actually just be to move back in front. Um,
Yes.
so that's interesting.
Yeah, both a positive and a negative because they may then move through it on their turn, but also it may not just go through the whole army bouncing through units, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess we're all in agreement on this one. I think we'll all be in agreement on the next one too. Andrew, changes to the item cost of magic items.
Yeah, so 2 items got tagged. Ogre Blade went from 65 points to 75 points, and Ruby Ring went from 30 to 35, and had its power level dropped to 1. Ogre Blade kind of makes sense. It's a really powerful item. It's a staple in almost every list you see, at least in the tournament scene. Um, so making it a little bit more expensive, I think, is the better way than trying to muck about with its actual effects. Ruby Ring. This one's kind of weird because it kind of got double hit. Power level got dropped, but it also went up in points. I think it's fine, but probably could have gotten away with just having one of those changed,
Mhm.
not both. But whatever, it's not. I'm fine with it either way. It's not a big deal.
Cool. Ryan?
Yeah, like 75 point ogre blade, sweet. Like means if you take it on a baron, it's using his entire magic allocation. You take it on a duke, he's still taking something. It's cool. Ruby ring, we've been asking for it to be more expensive, so that
Yes.
tracks. Um, I don't think I don't actually know if it matters if it's power level 1 or 2 because power level 2 is casts like a level 2 wizard, which would still
You're
just be
right. A
plus
one.
1.
Yeah.
So it's like
It does.
not
Yeah.
even a change.
You're right.
Um,
But yeah, you're right. And I don't think Fireball's casting value is dropped, right? Off the top of my
no, so
memory.
it's still
So
an 8.
it's straight. So it's just harder to cast now. Yeah. Good. Good. I think
Like
we've yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, it's harder to cast, but still like 7 is the most common roll on
Yeah.
2d6. So
56% of the time. Yeah.
yeah. And that's just 7, right? Like when you add 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
Yeah.
12,
Yes. Yes.
like you're still casting it most of the time.
Yeah. 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 For my part, I really like these changes. The Ogre Blade. I mean, the most critical thing here is going from 65 to 75 prevents you from pairing it with the Talisman of Protection. And that combo was way too common. I mean, your Chaos Lords and Chaos characters that come with, and now your, I guess, Cathay characters that come with a 5-up ward save base are going to be in are going to comparatively have an advantage. But in general, that combo was way too common and way too powerful. So just that little change, I think, is going to have a significant impact. So that's good. And then Ruby Ring, like I think every army basically that you run into has a Ruby Ring somewhere, making the spell harder to cast, increasing its points value up a little bit. I'm not sure 30 to 35 really does much because if your characters are not combat lords, typically they don't use their 100% of their magic item allotment. And so, your 100 points of magic items on a wizard typically are fully used or whatever, or support character. So I'm not sure the 5 extra points really matters, but whatever. Just making it harder to cast and a little bit more expensive may see it drop from a few lists, and which I think is a good thing just for list variety. So I'm fully on board with this. I wish that they had done significantly more changes of this nature across the game, but I think I've said that 100 times on the show, so whatever. Ryan, the next one.
Yes. So single-use items that have some kind of test to use them,
Yeah.
whether it be leadership or otherwise. They're mostly leadership. But anyway, if you don't succeed at the test, you still attempted to use the item and therefore can't use it anymore. Because that's what using things fucking means.
Yeah.
If you blow into a horn and a whole bunch of falcons don't magically show up to help you,
Yeah.
too fucking bad, but you still attempted to do it.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, the fact that this had to even be written bothers me. But
At least it's clear. Yeah.
yeah, for clarity, if you attempt to use a single use item and fail, you've still consumed it.
Yes.
So this also does suck for things like the Ring of Tal, which again, no one I don't think anyone was ever seriously arguing against this stance, but it
Yeah.
does, it is not great when you go to cast your bound spell that you can only use once and then you fail.
Yeah.
But you only spent 20 points on it, so whatever.
Yeah. Double whammy to something like the Falcon Horn, which we'll talk about later, but is now single use. So less relevant in Exiles, but in like Grand Army, it'll come up, right? Cool. Yeah. No, I like this one. I agree with you, Ryan, that didn't really need to be covered, but now that we're all on the same page, this is how we were playing locally for things like failing the leadership test on the Horn of Isha. So I'm in favor of this. This is how we were playing it. Happy with it. Andrew?
Yeah, nothing really to say. Just shuts up stupid arguments. So.
Okay. The next one is a slight change to how charging single models work. Basically, in the past, you would if a single model a single model in this case was straddling the front arc and the side arc, for instance, or the side and the rear, you would have to take automatically the most dangerous disadvantageous arc for the charger. So in my previous example, you'd have to charge the front arc. Now, unless it is very unclear which arc is the largest, like it's straight down the middle, you charge where the majority of the single model is located. So if you have a sliver of the model in its flank and most of it in its front arc, you have to charge the front arc. Yeah, I'm happy with this. It doesn't come up a ton, but it is like good and thematic. So it's just a clarity thing. I'm happy with it. No major issues. Andrew?
Um, yeah, I think at the beginning of the game, a lot of people thought this is how the rules played anyway. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. So yeah, I like the changes. I think it's positive and kind of gets rid of some silly feels bad moments sometimes. But that's
Yep.
about it.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'm good with this one.
Cool. Earthen Ramparts, Andrew.
Yeah. Earthen Ramparts now prevents you from receiving impact hits or stomp attacks. So basically, you get all the benefits of being behind a low linear obstacle. I know there was some conversation, at least in our group, about
Yep.
whether those effects counted or not, just because technically you are in base contact with the unit, even though they still get the benefits of being behind a low linear obstacle. But things like impact and soft attacks proc off of being in base to base contact with the unit. So there's a weird gray area there. At least this clears it up now. It makes the spell really, really good now, especially if you're facing off against a lot of monsters, dragons, chariots. So this is, I think, positive change, clears up any ambiguity, and makes that spell a lot more better than it used to be.
Yep. Ryan?
Yeah. So, this cleans up a question that was lingering from the last FAQ. And also has the interesting implication that, like, defending a low linear obstacle slash earthen ramparts slash, like, any other counts as defending a low linear obstacle stuff, like entrenchment from Nuln,
Mm-hmm.
would also, like, you would get none of the benefits of anything you have to do that requires you to be in base contact other than just creating a fighting rank.
Yeah.
So it also means, like, you would be restricted to one attack per model, things like that, going
Interesting.
both ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
but that's so, like it's just, if it applies to impact hits and stomps, it has to apply to, like, everything that requires base contact. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, this one, I think it improves the value of the spell, definitely. I know that after the last FAQ, there was a lot of contention on whether or not, like, this should be the case. I'm happy that it's been definitively ruled by GW that, there will be no stomp or impact hits. Fine, like, from a game balance and from a, like, what this changes or not, I don't really care. I'm just happy that it's been ruled one way or the other. So yeah, I don't have a ton to say on this one. Probably not saving your units, but it's good to have. So good. Not much to say. Ryan, before we move on to Forces of Fantasy, I think you had one thing that I forgot to put in.
yeah, so there's a nice little bit in the FAQ about how asking if your battle standard bearer can have higher leadership than your general.
Yep.
And they point out that your general is the character with the highest leadership. And if this means not upgrading a character with higher leadership in your army to be the battle standard bearer, so be it, so that they can be your general, then so be it. And I guess this would also apply to things like any other option that stops you from being the general, like some virtues and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But what this does do is, like, the whole, like, prince on a dragon, or noble on a dragon, but the general's actually the handmaiden, so that your Sisters of Avalorn can be in core and whatever, you cannot do anymore,
Mm-hmm.
because the noble's leadership 9 and the handmaiden's only leadership 8. So it means that there's been a bit of gaminess around, like,
Yeah.
like, even for Empire, like, now that Empire captains are leadership 9, you effectively have to take a Grand Master or a general in order for your captain to not be forced to be your general.
Yeah.
And things like that. So it's there's a lot more thought that now has to go into, like, which character options you're picking, and you can't just use the BSB or similar upgrade to, like, optimize your way out of higher leadership characters
Yeah.
being the general.
Agreed. No, this is it removes a little bit of gaminess, and I'm for it. I think that's a good move. So yeah, good. Andrew, do you have anything on that one, or?
I don't know. I think you guys got most of it.
Okay. So this concludes all of the and the most significant part of the fact. Let's be honest here. We do have some changes by faction, which we're gonna power through because there's not a ton. So yeah, let's move on. Let's start with Forces of Fantasy. I tried to have it where, guys, if you use a faction or play a faction, you're the one who talks about it. Unfortunately, none of us play dwarves, so I'm gonna get the first one here. So dwarves have had 3 changes. First of all, their rune casting has sort of been brought into line with other casters in the game, right? So your Anvil of Doom casts on a 2+ rather than 3+, which aligns with the level 3 and 4s, how they've been changed. However, interesting fact, they still dispel at a 3+. So anvils are one of the best dispellers, I guess, in the game now, which I think is thematic and cool based on what they're supposed to represent in the lore. So that's all great. On the negative side, a number of their bound spells have actually increased in casting value. So they are harder to cast now, which I'm sort of again fine with, given how dwarves are supposed to be with magic. And I know that, theoretically runes aren't magic, but they're kind of magic in game. Aside from that, there's been a significant nerf to the Trollhammer Torpedo. That one's gone from strength 8 to strength 5, and it can no longer be used in stand and shoot because it got the cumbersome rule. So I think that's decent enough. Decent enough change. I always found it strange that your min-sized Iron Drake units basically all were packing a cannon shot in them because of how the cost worked to upgrade that guy. So anyways, I think this is a good move. I know that dwarf players are pretty upset about it, but I think on the overall balance of things, given how infantry has changed and the missions have changed, I think the dwarves are in a better place than they were a little while ago, despite the nerf to Trollhammer torpedoes. So overall, those are the dwarf changes. I think overall this faction is a slight winner or a moderate level winner based on how the fact that they're an entirely infantry faction and now infantry is significantly better than it was before. So good day to be a dwarf player. Andrew, what are your thoughts on the dwarf changes?
I think, mostly it's positive. It brings their casting stuff in line with the rest of the changes. Sure, the Trollhammer Torpedo nerf is kind of a downside, but realistically, they have a lot of other things going for them now.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're infantry based, and being able to switch weapons between combats now, plus all the bonuses to infantry, I think that helps. And also, a lot of their stuff has an innate magic resistance already, which is now
Yes.
a really powerful ability given
Mm-hmm.
the changes to casting. So I think dwarves overall are in a pretty good place with the FAQ now.
Yep. Agreed. And most of their infantry is elite also, and I think they benefit more than some other types of infantry for sure. Ryan.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. You guys didn't cover here. It all seemed pretty logical.
Good day to be a short king, basically. Ryan, over to you for Empire.
Yeah. So firstly, the general and the captain's leadership went up by 1 respectively. So generals are leadership 10, and captains are leadership 9. And then state troops receive the horde rule, so they get an extra rank to their rank bonus. Great swords, now strength 4 base, which is awesome. And the Griffin standard is now confirmed to just give infinite rank bonus of +2 per rank, allowing you to exceed the rank bonus limit for the troop type. It is unclear by how much you can exceed the rank bonus limit by troop type, but that's a separate
Sure.
black hole. Weirdly, Hans von Lowenhacke does not become leadership 10. Fun fact. Because he is not an Empire general. He is a Hans von Lowenhacke. So I like all of this, because they didn't raise the leadership on state troops, so they're kind of definitely pushing the whole you bring state troops, you bring a 45 point or a cheapy captain, to give them the leadership. That's that's kind of what Empire wants you to do here. Horde, state troops, again, more combat res isn't bad. Great swords, being strength 6 with great weapons is cool. And the Griffin, it's just basically they've enabled you to build a cool static combat res brick, and great swords are by no means amazing.
Yes.
But at strength, with full plate and strength 6 and enablers,
Yeah.
they might be able to actually do something.
Yeah. And
Um,
impressive bodies or whatever it's called. Yeah.
yeah, like being able to fight in 2 ranks when
Yeah.
charged, and all of that stuff.
You might
Anyway,
get
I bought a
somewhere.
box
Yeah.
of great swords the other day. So,
Okay. Cool.
what do you guys think?
Yeah,
Andrew?
I think this is all pretty positive. Empire is usually considered one of those have-not armies. So I think all these are, good changes to the Empire. Um, kind of dig the greatsword changes just because now that they can fight in 2 ranks, if you take a decent sized unit of them, I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to think twice about charging them because you're not going to be able to get rid of all their attacks, and then you're getting wailed on by strength 6 great weapon attacks. Like that's a scary prospect to face for a lot of stuff, especially if you're taking cav units that don't have a lot of models to begin with. It's not a sure thing to take them out. I'm not saying they're going to be like, oh my god, what the fuck, they kill everything in sight, but they are definitely a scarier thing to face now. So I think that's cool. And the Griffin standard, I'm sure there's some kind of weird giant horde block you can do now and just
Sure.
generate like a foolish amount of combat res. So I think, there's some cool play here. And I think that's what Empire players were looking for to begin with. So we'll see how that shakes out. If it propels them up into the stratosphere of good armies, I don't know,
Maybe not.
but probably not. But I think they are, slightly in a better place than they were before this.
Agreed. That's also my assessment. I think they've improved, let's say mildly, or somewhat improved as per all of these changes. I think unfortunately the Empire probably needs more than that to get into like good prime competitive space. That being said, like these changes individually, the leadership change is I think is kind of whatever. I think Empire, though, does struggle against taking a lot of terror checks, so I guess it does help a little bit against that. Fine, no big issue. Empire State Troops getting Horde for me is a bit of a weird solution to the Empire State Troops' perceived issues. Their whole shtick is that they're professional soldiers, but now they're also a horde of like, and typically that as far as the game goes, that's reserved for like your undisciplined mobs of like goblins and shit. So
Horde is
fine.
the worst named rule in the game.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the effect is what the thing is. It's not
Yeah,
their
yeah, they get
horde and
more leadership.
rabble. It's they get a fucking extra rank bonus. So
Yeah, yeah,
I think
exactly. Of one.
it's a positive
So
change regardless of what the rules actually
no, no, no.
cause.
It is. It is. It is. I just don't think this is exact. Like, it feels like Empire State Troops need more than just getting an extra rank bonus. But whatever. Like, whatever helps them out is great because they need help. Great swords. I mean, between all the changes, they're probably a lot more palatable than they were before. You know, getting more attacks out of them, higher strength, potentially getting them to more leadership. You know, maybe I don't know, being crazy and stacking some banners on them and stuff. Like, fine. I don't think they're good, but they're certain. Like they used to be pretty garbage tier, but I think they're actually they may be somewhat, I guess, playable now. It'll be interesting to see. So, yeah, mild improvement to the Empire. Um, Bretonia, Ryan, right back at you for your favorite faction.
Yeah, Royal Pegasuses went up from 60 to 70 points. Pegasus Knights went up from 55 to 59 points per model. And Lost Lance Formation, which I realized I was probably like one of 5 people to use anyway. And the Falcon Horn is now a single use item. So yeah, like I have no real qualms. Like Royal Pegasuses are good, them costing 10 points more. Cool. Pegasus Knights costing 4 points more per model. Cool. All of that added together, I think I lose a 5-man unit of squires.
Sure.
Like you know what I mean? Like
Like
affording
a
those
40,
changes
yeah.
is
Yeah,
not
yeah.
in any way like breaking my army.
No.
The Falcon Horn being single use, I think the only thing I'm upset about that is like, yes, it is reliable because I usually play Exiles and it's like leadership 8 or 9, veteran, whatever.
Mhm.
But I find it a little weird that like I'm paying 40 points to take a test that I might fail to do something that Cathay gets to do without the ability to fail for 35 points.
Well, Ryan,
At
if
the opportunity cost of a magic banner. But yes.
well, Ryan, I will tell you though that if you feel bad looking at Cathay, you'll feel good looking at Beastman because they got the same thing for more points and
no.
less leadership too.
Like I totally get that. It's just one of those things where I was
Yeah,
like, like there were a couple ways they could have done this where, make veteran not apply, anyway,
yeah,
like making it single use and keeping it expensive and then giving another faction the exact same ability for fewer points. Just it's kind of annoying. But like I might still take it. Like the clutch turn, it's handy,
yeah.
but it's definitely no longer a like I will ensure that
Auto
there's
take.
40
Yeah,
points of fucking space to take
yeah.
this thing. So that's it.
Andrew.
Yeah, like the points changes to the peg stuff, I think is a nothing. Like,
Yeah.
sure, I guess it makes you, if you have like your list like super min maxed and tuned, like it will make you have to decide where you're gonna make those cuts. Uh, so I think that's okay, but I don't think it's super impactful. The Falcon Horn change, I mean, it probably needed to happen. It was a very powerful piece for what you were paying for. And like Ryan said, you can usually reliably get it off most of the game, if not every turn. Um, I do think that probably they should have changed the points. Like if Cathay set the standard for what that ability should cost, then maybe that plus the Beastman version should have all been sort of
Mhm.
pulled into that same points range just to even it out. But otherwise, like, yeah, it's a whatever.
Yeah.
Bretonians are still fine.
Yes,
They're not
they're
going to
still
be
fine.
crying too hard about this.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think overall my assessment is essentially no change to Bretonia in terms of how powerful it is with all these changes. So by my count, if you have two characters on Royal Pegasus, Pegasi, and then you have 5 or 6 Peg Knights, your total value of your list is going up by around 40 points. If you decide that the Falcon Horn is no longer worth it as a single use item, your total value is going down by 40 points. So I guess it's at that point it's a bit of a wash. This is a step in the first step in the right direction, I think, in terms of how GW looks at Bretonia, but like again, I don't think this amounts to much in terms of their power level. I think the collective, player base is going to breathe a sign of relief, a sigh of relief. Sorry, when they see that the Falconhorn is now a single-use item because that thing was the bane of many people's existence. I'm in favor of it. It's an incredibly powerful item when it's every turn, and it's essentially always goes off with rerolls and stuff like that. So yeah, I think Brett's may end up even in a slightly better place because as you know, you get more and more infantry on the table, particularly as you get small units of infantry that are there to catch like the multiple objectives and run to like table quarters, all this kind of stuff. Like those are the exact kind of targets that a high mobility first charge army wants to hit. So I think Brett's may actually come out from this not too quite unscathed and in a decent position, and I'm willing to say maybe even in a slightly better position. So I think this is all good for Brett's. Ryan, your last army, Wood Elves.
Yes. Wood Elves. The biggest takeaway, because there's some other random crap, but the biggest takeaway is that the Wood Elf Forest feature that you get to deploy is restricted to not less than 3 inches wide and not more than 9 inches deep. And
Sure. The other direction, yeah.
The point being is, and honestly, like, I didn't even clue into this until the other day when, like, someone online was talking about people making, like, basically, like, 11-inch long, like,
Yeah.
1 inch
Walls.
deep, like, very, very thin
To block line
forests,
of sight, yeah.
so that you could just kind of, like, jump back and forth through them. Yeah, cool. Like, clearly the game designers wanted you to bring a forest and not, like, a
A
Monty
hedge.
Python-esque hedgerow that you were going to be fighting through.
Yeah.
So sweet. Like, that's it makes you do the thing they wanted you to do. Good
Yeah.
job, Games Workshop. Um,
Good change, yeah.
I got no complaints. Like, if your
Yeah.
entire game plan hinged on deployable hedgerows, then
You're in for a
I'm
rough day.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew, what else?
Yeah, this is I don't think a huge change. You can still get like a 9 inch square of a forest if you're looking for that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's just nice they give like proper dimensions to this
Yeah.
instead of
No.
allowing guys to do stupid shit.
Yeah, it prevents some silly gaminess stuff. I'm all for it. In terms of that change, wood elves are, I think, not overly affected by the changes that have sort of hit the game right now. So I'll be interested to see how they sort of bounce from all these changes. Because their units tended, like their shooting units, tend to be fairly small. They don't have any great, really. They don't have that many great infantry units to really utilize those bonuses as much as possible. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how wood elves sort of fan out after these changes. High elves, Andrew as the resident elf guy.
What the fuck? You gave me high elves?
Yeah,
Sacrilege. White Lions gain Furious Charge. Tracy and Warhost, their difficult terrain feature is now just a Wood Elf Woods. And the magic item Ring of Fury, uh, the bound Hammerhand spell now casts at a plus run rather than a +2. So it's a bound level 1 spell. I think this is cool. White Lions getting Furious Charge is pretty spicy. They're already kind of usable as a infantry block even before these changes. So now giving them something like Furious Charge, I think, is going to juice them up quite a bit. Giving them the forest, I mean, they should have had that from the start. I don't know why it was a difficult terrain feature, given all the lore and whatnot surrounding Trace. It kind of made no sense. That was just a difficult terrain piece, which is kind of useless in the game for the most part. So giving them a woods, I think, is a little bit more. They can be a little more tactical with that terrain feature now. And the change to Ring of Fury, like that's just hey, Magic's changing the game. We gotta adjust everything. It's kind of a nothing burger. Still gonna probably go off quite reliably.
agreed.
Kevin?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the general high elf list is not really impacted by this very much. I think the comp changes were much more impactful on high elves. I will say I think Creation Warhost is in a much better place though. White Lions, if you wanted to take those, now they get Furious Charge. That's great. When they don't get Furious Charge, they have extra attacks. So that's also good. And then the difficult terrain switching to a Wood Elf is I think excellent because critically it now blocks line of sight, whereas it didn't before. Your whole army has moves to cover basically anyways, so it's not a big deal for you. But it allows you, let's say you were going to take those white lions, to at least give them some cover as they move up the board for the first few turns. So yeah, good changes I think for the Creation Warhost. Not much of an impact for the broader high elf list there. And we've
White
talked in the
White
past about.
Lions are core in the Tracing Warhost too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they can hold an
Or is it?
objective. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
So they're a really good piece then
Yeah,
for that army.
Yeah, you can even put the forest over the objective, I think, and then so they have cover bonuses in there too. So plus their innate bonuses to shooting. It's good. Yeah,
Can't have any terrain on the objectives.
you can't. Okay, well, sure.
Way
Okay,
to be
so
that guy, Kevin.
sorry. Yeah, but nonetheless, they're in a better place. At least if you put the terrain in front and then you're behind. Like, anyways, you could still fuck around with it. Ryan.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this all makes sense. Like White Lions with Furious Charge sounds awesome. We already talked about Forest, and Ring of Fury is the same thing as the Ruby Ring. Like
Yeah.
power level 1, power level 2 are a +1 to cast. So
Exactly.
yeah.
All right. So perfect. That concludes Forces of Fantasy. Let's move on to Ravening Hordes. Andrew, you want to stick around for Orcs and Goblins? I know you're about to leave.
Okay, sure. Orcs and Goblins. Fanatics, a unit of Night Goblins can no longer launch Fanatics if it is marching column. Good. Trolls. All trolls now get the Motley Crew rule. And Black Orc Chariots are now restricted to only the Nomadic Wa Army of Infamy. These, I think the Fanatic change is good. I haven't seen it personally, but I have heard of stories of people throwing their Night Goblins into marching column and then moving up the board super far and just launching a bunch of Fanatics, which is probably not the intent of the Fanatics in rule to begin with, and it's just kind of a cheesy, dumb play that really doesn't seem tactically smart. If you're thinking of, big armies marching across a battlefield, that's kind of a dumb move. The trolls getting Motley Crew, I think, is interesting. It allow you to sort of choose what you put into that unit, so you're not forced to take everything with great weapons or everything with hand weapons. I don't know how impactful that's going to be realistically.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing it either. Yeah.
I guess if you're trying to like save on points, or if you want to have like your unit champion have like a great weapon just to be the badass in the crew or something. I don't know. It's not like they can get shields or anything where you can fuck around with like armor saves. So that's kind of the main way Motley Crew is used right now, other than being a badass podcast. And then the Black Orc Chariot thing, I think that kind of sucks. That's a really good, powerful piece. So it kind of sucks that it's now restricted to the Nomadic Wa. Because, it was showing up a little bit in regular Orc and Goblin lists, and it sucks to lose that. But I guess on the flip side, like it gives Nomadic Wa sort of their own unique flavor now and their own like the sweet chariot they can take. So I don't know. Seems again more of like neutral changes, not like super game breaking. I think Orcs and Goblins are still going to be in a, the middle of the pack place they currently are at. I don't think there's huge game breaking stuff here.
Yep, Ryan.
Yeah, no, this is all kind of fine. Like, okay, cool. Fanatic marching column. Someone got bad touched by that at some point, I guess.
Yeah.
The trolls. I feel like this is another one of the like questing knights now come in units of 3 thing, where it's just it accommodates you building the trolls as they come out of the box.
Sure.
There's a few of those buried through all this. And yeah, the Black Orc Chariot, I actually thought that was how it was the whole time, and it wasn't until later I realized that they didn't put anything to stop it. So it makes sense. Like the Black Orc Boar Chariot's a Nomadic Wa thing. Characters on said chariot, Nomadic Wa thing. I'm good with all of that.
Cool. Yeah, I like. So one I like, one I'm super neutral on, and one I don't necessarily like. So I think the Fanatics is a good change. Like it's super gamey. Like the play before was obviously, you put your fanatics, your night goblins in marching column. They march up the board, then they get arcane urgency. They march again up the board, and then you just toss a bunch of fanatics super far away from where you started. That like it was a real gotcha moment for people who didn't know how to sort of deal with it or didn't expect it. So that is, I think, a good change for sure. After that, like the trolls, I'm like I struggle. Like maybe you'll save just like a handful of points on a big troll unit by not giving the back rank, like let's say great weapons or something. But ultimately, I think it doesn't matter much. You're going to give everybody in the front rank great weapons anyways because you need your trolls to actually do damage. Otherwise, your army, especially your troll horde, is not going to go very far. And the Black Orc Chariot, I'm a bit like sad to see that one go. It was a cool mount option for the Black Orc war bosses and big bosses. But I understand like Ryan's reasoning here that don't steal the toys from the Army of Infamy and give it to everybody because at that point, why do you need the Army of Infamy? So sure, I get it, but I still like to have the option sprinkled around the army. I think overall, orcs and goblins are in a worse spot than they were before all the changes that we had over the last little bit there, specifically losing real good access to a very effective tool in the poison shooting block is definitely hurt them, regardless of what you thought of that type of unit. So yeah, a bit of a pouring one out for orcs and goblins players. Nonetheless, the impact of the comp on their ability to take multiple casters has been greatly reduced by the changes in the FAQ, which reduced the basically the casting bonus of a level 3 to essentially being the same as a level 4 anyways. So that part is not as bad, but I still think they're kind of losers in this whole process. Cool. Let's move on to the real losers in this whole process. Warriors of Chaos. So Warriors of Chaos got dinged in the comp pretty hard. It feels like the 500 point limit was intended for them. However, they've have a number of additional changes in this one. So a positive one to start off, like Exalted Champions can now be mounted on Manticores and Chaos Dragons, which I guess is fine, and actually makes the Chaos Dragon like playable again, because on a Chaos Lord, he was almost assuredly over 500 points and couldn't be taken. So that part I guess is positive. Chaos Trolls now gain Motley Crew, which is whatever. Chaos Knights gain counter charge, which frankly they should have had from the beginning, considering what they are. They were a vastly underperforming unit. I still don't think they're great, but at least they're a little bit more playable. The Chaos Dragon gets Impetuous, which is unfortunate for it, but its leadership is fairly high, so it should be fine. This one's a big hit to that dragon or any other monsters. So the 2 auras that give you -1, so the 2 chaos mutations or gifts of chaos that give you -1 to be hit from shooting and always strikes last can no longer be taken on monstrous mounts, i.e. your dragons and stuff. So that one is definitely hitting those big monsters significantly. The range of the Infernal Puppet has been reduced from 24 points to 15 points, I think, which greatly impacts how much use you get out of it, especially with the other nerfs that have happened to Magic, meaning that Magic's going to be less, I think, prevalent in the game or dominant. So the need for the Infernal Puppet has been reduced a little bit, and then its range has been reduced significantly, which I think definitely hurts its viability. Still a good item, but it's no longer an auto take in my book. Dragon Ogres have had their cost increase from 56 to 59 points per model. Not changing anything, guys. Like, Dragon Ogres were great at 56, and they're fantastic still at 59 points, so don't worry about it. Skin Wolves, Warped Form has been changed so that it no longer applies to any characters which join the unit. So this one, I get that it was a gamey thing, but it was definitely one of the tools in the bag for the Wolves of the Sealess. Losing this one, likely losing a dragon. A lot of your units being skirmishers, not getting access to the extra attacks and the rules for infantry, like all those things, I think hurt Wolves of the Sea pretty significantly. But yeah, overall, these are, I think, generally good change. I guess my biggest gripe is I wish the other top factions had been hit or touched in a way similar to Chaos. It feels like GW thought Warriors of Chaos is the problem with the meta of the game right now, which to me is a bit of a strange one. But hey, I think overall, I wish more armies had gotten this level of changes, though. Ryan, what are your thoughts on all the changes for Warriors of Chaos?
Yeah, so demonic mounts, okay, cool. I guess that they're more of a sorcery thing.
Yeah.
Exalted champions on dragons and chaos lords. So this one makes me laugh when like they like built a targeted comp to like limit things.
Yes.
And then I literally just sat here and for 499 and 494 points respectively, you can just have you could use almost your entire character allotment to bring 2 exalted champions each on a chaos dragon with 5-up ward, 5-up regen.
Fun.
Yeah, like
So we've gone from
it,
the single dragon build to the double
it's
dragon
actually
build.
worse.
Yes.
It's actually worse.
Amazing. Yeah.
Um yeah, just fight 2 dragons. Fuck
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Throw in
And
a
those are
warp
no
fire dragon while we're at
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and those are no pushover dragons either. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's still like 4 attacks and on the rider with a great weapon and
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it's silly. Um Chaos Trolls, they got Motley Crew, don't care. Um Chaos Knights with countercharge, like it make like the horse they come on has
Yeah.
countercharge, but the unit of knights
It
didn't.
was dumb. Yeah, it was
It was
dumb.
really weird. Um the Dragon's Impetuous, oh no, it's also like leadership 9 or 10. Um but I guess like there's a chance. There is a chance that it has to charge something.
Yeah.
Um Gift of Chaos, yeah, like I don't have a huge problem with these two things being more on less durable, I guess, character
Sure.
type.
Yeah.
Infernal Puppet range going down. It was a weird number. Like, why 15?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Just a very specific number.
Yes.
But yes, like I do like that. Just because it, you know, it's a very powerful item and still
Mhm.
is.
Yep.
So
Do you still think
I
it's auto take territory or like me, are you on the
um
fence?
see at a 15-inch range, it's in a weird spot. Like if I'm putting it on like a level 1 or 2, I think it
Yeah.
would be auto take because they want to get close anyway. Um, but it's not like it's kind of in that falcon horn. Like I can
Yeah, yeah.
build something that's gonna benefit from it, but I'm not gonna be like I start by taking an infernal puppet and then build
Exactly.
my army.
Okay, so it's no longer
Drag
auto take. Yeah.
yeah. Dragon ogres cost more. Yeah,
Whatever.
that makes sense.
3 points.
And then
Yes.
yeah, and the skin wolves thing. Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
all of that. Like aside from them trying to fix one problem and then somehow creating the universe where we now have double exalted champion dragon lord
Yes.
and like it within comp restrictions, like
Yeah.
no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, otherwise I'm good.
Yeah, and especially you can run this army with maybe no wizard just because it has access to some good anti-magic items, right? Magic
Oh,
resist items.
did I mention both of those dragons that I created had brazen collars too?
Exactly,
Um,
exactly, right? That's what I was getting at. So I think there may be maybe some play for double exalted champion chaos dragon as a chaos list. We'll have to see. Yeah,
oh, glorious.
glorious. Yeah. Okay. Now a faction that got hit extremely hard, Tomb Kings.
Yes.
I'm fucking with you.
Skeleton Chariot went up or
No,
went down 2 points per model for some reason.
for some fucking reason.
Casket of Souls casts at power level 2 which again is power level 2, not just power level 1, because it counts as a level of wizardry.
Yeah, I think it's because before it was power level 3, I believe, which would have made it
Okay.
a 2+. Yeah.
Okay. Mort cults casting. Yeah, and your casting bonus for like killing small animals and statues and stuff
And there
is
was
only
much
+1.
rejoicing. Yeah.
Yeah, like it takes a lot of the wind out of the sails of mortuary cults.
Yeah.
Like, the chariots, sure, they're cheaper. I don't think I've actually seen anyone bring any of them. Like I've seen like army lists on the internet, but like
Yeah.
I think the only time I saw chariots was that one
THGT.
time that I played Cleary and my Duke like wrecked Cetra.
Yeah.
um so I don't have a problem
Yeah.
with any of these changes. Like they're chipping away at all of the things that made mortuary cults a little ridiculous, and I think a lot of other parts of the FAQ separately address that stuff as well.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. I think I'm their poison shooting block is no longer really viable as far as I'm concerned. So no, I think I'm happy with this. I am shocked and flabbergasted that the only thing in the game that has had a points reduction is skeleton chariots and tomb kings of all armies. Like, first of all, tomb kings didn't need any point reductions. Second of all, skeleton chariots is not the thing in this army that even needs a point reduction. So I have no idea what the game designers are trying to do with that one, but whatever. It's not like skeleton chariots are a big problem, and they probably won't be by having had their points cost reduced by like what 5%, like whatever, a little bit less than 5%. It's fine. The Casket of Souls casting on a power level 2, brings it in line with everything else. Although its bonuses to cast are now, I think, more relevant in a game where like the innate bonus to cast of casters is now lower, and the Mortuary Cult's like casting bonus is now capped at 1. So potentially, I think you'll see more Caskets of Souls. Like, they were really popular early in the edition, then they dropped to generally 1 per list, and now I think they may go back up to 2, but we'll see. And the thing I am by far the happiest with is Mortuary Cult's casting bonus now being reduced to 1. Like, I think there was much rejoicing around the old world player base the moment that thing was announced. Yeah, good riddance. Let me say that. So yeah, Tomb Kings. I'm happy with these changes and perplexed by the skeleton chariots. Beastmen. I'll cover Beastmen. I've played a few games with them. So and Andrew's gone. So there's basically only 2 changes. So if you were really enjoying the Dark Coven Wild Herd, the Dark Coven rule in the Wild Herd Army of Infamy, that one is basically gone now. So it's been nerfed to essentially have the casting bonus capped at a +1 to bring you in line, I guess, with Mortuary Cults. However, the miscasting, which used to be all doubles, is now only double ones. So basically, all this means now for Dark Coven is that you can get a +1 to your casting when you so choose, essentially. And there's very limited impact. If you roll double ones to miscast, it'll spread to all the wizards, but like that's, I think, much smaller of a downside. So your upside has been reduced and your downside has also been reduced. I think because they've lost a significant portion of their casting bonus, I'm not sure this Army of Infamy is really going to see play. Just anecdotally from the SBot online, I think a lot of people were interested in picking up the Wild Herd. I'm not sure that's going to keep going now, but it is what it is. The second thing I'm going to say is the banner of the Warped Moon. The second thing that's changed, is now single use, so it's very similar to the Falcon Horn. Hope you Beastman players enjoyed it for like the 3 weeks where you could use it. And yeah, that's about it. I'm not sure that either. Well, I guess we can make a case for Banner of the Warped Moon, but I certainly don't think I don't know that the Wild Herd change was needed or needed to be this drastic, because I'm not sure like the Army of Infamy is still really viable. I don't know what you think, Ryan.
I don't really have strong opinions about either of those two things. Like, yeah, your Dark Coven cool. You can get like technically if you want to like anchor yourself to a herd stone, you could
Sure,
get a
you're
level
+2.
4 up to +4.
You're correct.
But then you're also like fixed geographically on the table.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Banner of the Warp Moon is the same complaint as the Falcon Horn. Like,
yeah,
it's whatever.
Cool. So that concludes all of the errata changes. So first things first, Ryan, do you think who are the big winners and losers out of all the changes that we've seen? And do you think there's any shift in the top dog factions of like Tomb Kings, Bretonnians, Vampire Counts, Warriors of Chaos? Do you think those guys are still at the top?
So I think a lot of the middle of the pack armies got boosts out of this. Like your dwarves, your elves in some ways. But it's like it's hard to tell without having like played the new missions more
Yeah.
to like really say like, okay, yes, this is whatever. But I do think in the grand scheme of things, like vampire counts still have all of the levers
Yeah.
to
Unaffected.
play
Yeah.
the like vampire counts are just they're fine. Tomb Kings, they've got a couple different ways they can go, but again, still have all the levers to play the new where the game's going. Warriors of Chaos, I think is like swings and roundabouts. Like they lost some things, but they can now also bring some like really tanky, good
Infantry.
unit
Yeah.
strength core infantry or cavalry or whatever just things and bully people off of that hill or objectives or whatever. Wow, they're two fucking dragon lords go eating thing. Like you could probably make an army now that just has 3 dragons and like 30 chaos warriors in it and
Yeah.
probably be fine. Bretonnians, there's a lot of stuff here that's going to like very negatively impact like Bretonnian like knights, questing knights, grail knights, etc. The Pegasus Knights don't get hit as hard, but it's still not great. Like like as we were discussing the other day, like yes, if I spend 600 to 800 points on a unit, it's going to delete anything it touches.
Yeah.
But I'm also spending 600 to 800 points to go around killing like 200 points for the stuff at a time.
Sure.
So like the cost value proposition is not as good as it was before.
Agreed.
So not 100% sure how that's going to shake out, but I will say like Grand Army might come out of this a little bit ahead of Exiles. Like yes, the cannons are great, but that Vanguard like delivery system for the Pegasus Knights and characters was the big selling point. Where now knowing you're going to go second and having that ward save might actually be more valuable in the next
Agreed.
paradigm of the game.
Yeah, agreed.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think good take on. I think generally a lot of the middle of the pack has just risen. I think collectively, which is good. The only exceptions I think in the middle of the pack, and I've talked about it, so I won't really reiterate much. But orcs and goblins, I think, have fallen down a few rungs on the ladder. I think beastmen also ended up getting splashed a little bit just from losing stuff like losing the poison shooting option really for them, and because it's no longer viable. I think the Army of Infamy, I'm not sure like Wild Herd really has a place anymore. So I think that also hurts them. So yeah, I think Beastmen taking a little bit of a drop. Nothing too significant. They're still a good faction, but yeah. I think at the top of the pile, which is what I think most people are concerned with, from our like top 4 factions. I think Tomb Kings have definitely dropped mild amounts. They're still a very good faction. I think Bretonnians are essentially unchanged. Vampire counts are, I think, improved overall because none of the changes have really impacted them at all negatively, and they do have very, very solid infantry options. Graveguard are fantastic. Ghouls are very, very good. They're better than you'd expect them. Forget skeletons. And zombies are just a good tar pit unit. So I think, I think actually vampire counts are in a very good place. The regen changes depending on how the dust settles for like crumbling and all that kind of stuff. May even put them in a better place. So I would say if I were to revise this, I think vampire counts are potentially the best faction in the game right now. The strongest, most competitive. I think I would put Tomb King second, Brett's third, and Warriors of Chaos. But the gap between Warriors of Chaos and like whoever's following up between like Beastmen and High Elves is probably closed a little bit. And those are some very hot takes, depending on how the missions and everything shakes out. Okay, Ryan, any like, how do you think these changes overall, and then the compact? I know we've talked a little bit about it there, but changes overall, the compacts and the new missions are going to impact the overall meta of the game. Like, do you think army construction writ large and meta of lists, like, what do you think that'll look like?
So I personally think that after this FAQ, you can almost just do away with the 2 comps that were presented in the matched playbook. Just because of how all these changes work, like the restrictions on wizards seem wholly unnecessary. Like, okay, I can't take a 700 point dragon lord anymore, but I can take 2 exalted champions on dragons. Like these things are, they're nothing really changed with it. And like the other comp with limiting how many iterations of a unit you can have, kind of whatever to me. But so yeah, I don't really think, I personally think after a few months people are going to realize that we could maybe just lift the comps and that
We'll see, right?
FAQ will have achieved the effect they wanted. The missions, I think, are going to shape the game depending on how they're implemented. Like the way they're going to be implemented here is not necessarily the way they're going to be implemented elsewhere. As I talked about last time, like we're going for a spread so that, basically like every archetype of army list is not necessarily good into every single mission, and that will have some impact on things. But I think ultimately you're going to see, I hate using this term in this sense, but you're going to see more what could be described as combined arms looking armies.
Sure.
Where,
varied or
well, like you will have some like blocks of unit strength from your core that can go do the objective game, whether it be holding or taking. And then you will have, fast moving, hard hitting other elements of your army that will do the bullying enemy off of method of scoring, or, going for that deep baggage train destruction. And then you'll have enablers, be it magic, shooting, etc. So you'll have like, I think you may see a move to more well-rounded army composition. Is I guess what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that, Ryan. So just like some high level hot takes here on how I think lists will evolve. So first thing I will say is I don't think the haves and have-nots in terms of factions will change much out of this. Like, sure, there's a bit of jockeying for position. I just said, probably Vampire Counts ends up at the top of the pile. But I mean, like, there were already a have faction. They're just staying in that realm, if you will, and they maybe have shifted slightly up there. But like, nobody's cracking the top S or A tier of factions out there. So that's the first thing. I think in terms of like individual list design, I think monsters are still very relevant in the game. Specifically, monstrous mounts, I think have very much of a place and area that they occupy in terms of like you're designing your lists as hammers. Um, a lot of the things that kept them in check have been actually removed. So poison, shooting, especially magic to a lesser degree, has been changed. So I think, yeah, again, monsters are still very relevant. I just think you'll need to have to be more careful in terms of how you employ them because they give partial points now. They don't necessarily win combats into infantry as readily as they used to. So there's a lot more that needs to go into planning how you use your monsters, but they're still relevant. The second thing I think is the construct of how you build your core will drastically change. So I think previously you were incentivized to either take core that was very mobile and therefore useful, if you had cavalry and core type situation, or core that just didn't give up any points or was very difficult to get points from. I think that's changed. You want core now that scores objective points really. And that will impact because you'll need to have, and I think most people are going to settle for a big unit of core for missions like King of the Hill, and then some smaller units of like scoring core, 10 15 unit strength around that area for like missions like strategic objectives or strategic areas, whatever it's called there, where you have multiple objectives you need to hold. So again, core will completely change. I think infantry overall has improved significantly, but I think specifically in core, because you need scoring on objectives, and I don't think you're still going to see many people take infantry and core for 500 points, and then after that take like, I don't know, Chaos Chosen for another fucking 400 points of infantry. Like, I don't think that list design used to work, certainly, and I don't think it works now because they don't have the ability to score points and they're still not dictating their engagements. I think you'll see more war machines because of the compact. Specifically, let's be honest, cannons. I think cannons will become a little bit more prevalent. Cannons are also great at shooting into slow-moving blocks of infantry. So there is that too. Yeah, I think those become more relevant and more prevalent. Sorry, in the meta. And then the last thing I'll say is I think magic has overall taken a drop. Things are harder to cast. You'll generally, I think, get fewer spells that you can cast. Magic resistance is now significantly more impactful than it was before. And then you've got your magic tends to be more swingy because your bonus to casting will represent a smaller portion of your overall casting roll. So it'll be more on dice. It'll be more swingy, which I think overall I like this collective slew of changes. I think I'll be happy to see the lists evolve, and I think it'll result in slightly less of a monster skew than it does now, just because you'll have to round out your list a little bit more. So, yeah, I like it. Cool. Let's move on. And I think last thing I'll say is I think undead are still very, very well placed to play missions and
Absolutely.
to live in this new meta that we're in. Okay, Ryan, just as we close this out, what's some of your favorite standout changes from across the FAQ, errata, missions, what have you, like all these changes?
I really like the change to the fighting rank and like pile of bodies or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The thing that allows regular and heavy infantry to fight in, depth instead of just pure width.
Yeah.
Especially when combined with like the changes to challenges and outnumbering, things like that. It does mean that you will certainly have to work harder with things like cavalry and things like not hyper elite cavalry, but like your kind of like units you're forced to take, like Knights of the Realm or Empire Knights or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to work harder with those. And then I also really like that BSB thing that I brought up. I think it's kind of interesting now that like you have to plan around what you're taking. I don't know.
Yeah.
You?
I'm gonna name 4 things. So I like the changes to magic. I think magic was way too much of a sure thing before. Now I think it's been brought back into line. It's opened up the viability of having lower level casters and different armies of infamy, that kind of stuff. So I'm very, very happy with the magic changes. Happy with the infantry changes. I don't think it'll do exactly what people think it will. However, infantry is definitely more viable, and in fact is a requirement, I think, in a lot of the missions. So that's good. So that's the second thing. The third thing, I like changes to challenges. Challenges, I think, have been brought back into line a little bit to reduce the gaminess while still being impactful. And the fourth thing I will say is GW's openness to look at targeted points changes is a shift. So I'm happy to see that. So yeah, those are my 4 things. What are some changes, Ryan, that you would have liked to see that did not occur?
I would have liked to see more restrictions on Swift Stride, or just straight up removing it from a bunch of units.
Yeah.
But we talked about that in a bunch of other episodes. I kind of hard pressed to like. There's some things I would have preferred they didn't do in this FAQ, but they kind of hit my broad wish list of things other than addressing Swift Stride. So it's more just I wish they hadn't deleted some of the FAQ answers that they thought they could get away with removing, and things like that. But I don't think they missed some giant glaring hole to me. But what do you think?
I'm going to agree with you on a lot of these. So I have 4 things listed that I wish they would have changed more. The first one, I've said it, I think 1,000 times, points changes. There needs to be broader points changes than what they just did to open up list construction within factions, especially. That's the first thing. Second is the same one as you, Ryan, Swift Stride. I think that needs to be addressed at a systemic level because it's too impactful right now. Third thing is stacking saves. I wish they would have addressed that in some way, shape, or form, because regardless of your dragons going from 2+, 5+5+ to 3+5+5+, that has changed very little, frankly. I wish they would have done a bit more on that front. And then the last thing I'm going to say, similar to you, is I wish maybe they would have spent a little bit more time cleaning up some of the wonky language in some of the FAQ responses. As you said yourself, it shouldn't FAQ answers should clear things up. They shouldn't generate new questions. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing in sub point to that is deleting items out of the FAQ and not indicating it is just it's just bad form. This shouldn't be an egg hunt to find out what's still in there. It should be pretty obvious to readers. So cool. I think this closes out our review of all the changes. This is some really massive stuff. We both agree. I know Andrew agreed too. And I'm really, really excited to get cracking and start playing some games under this brave new world that we live in. Anything you want to shout out, Ryan, as we close out?
As always, don't forget to sign up for Capital City Bloodbath here in Ottawa at the end of August. Come hang out at Andrew's big event. That's it.
Yeah, sign up for the 20th of July event at the Red Dragon that good friend of the podcast, Danny's running. And otherwise, see you guys next time.